Toney, the Boxing Podcast, broadcasting to you live from the true north. This is your good friend, Mr. BDA, and I sure am glad, that's right, sure I'm glad that everybody could be on board for this one. Fellas, in this episode, we've got a fantastic one for you. It's a bit of a free-form episode here. Just going to talk about a couple of things regarding the boxing's past, and what it means about the future. I mean, again, you can't talk about boxing without referring to the past, its rich history. I don't know why the music here stopped suddenly. But anyway, we're going to be talking about all that plus more. Chief is going to join us. We've been talking about doing this type of episode for a while, and there's not much going on this Saturday, so might as well just do a little bit of a casual conversation here in regards to boxing. You know, we're going to be focusing on all fights, but anything really goes at the end of the day, so you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to get dropped. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about here is, before we get down to the fun, let's get the business out of the way, fellas. You know the drill. If you want to donate a couple of shekels our way, you're certainly welcome to do so with the Super Chat feature. You can also join the membership program. That way you get you more bang for your buck. You can also donate via the Buy Me a Coffee app, link in the description below. Or you can join Patreon. But the most important thing is you can hit to like, you subscribe, and you spread that BDA gospel. Speaking of gospel, we can't thank people enough for the Roadcaster Pro that you guys helped us. You guys helped us raise the money for that. That way, the callers are going to be smoother. We're going to be able to hear them better. That the people on Discord, the panelists, are going to be able to hear me and the callers better. They already hear Bucho well because he's got one, and also it allows you to seamlessly transition between certain sounds. Don't have to go around clicking. It's more professional. You just adjust a couple of faders, a couple of knobs here and there, and you're golden. So this was all thanks to you guys. Really appreciate it. Can't thank you enough. I really can't thank you enough. We can't thank you enough. So shout out to you fellas. And we're going to be installing that one as soon as we get our hands on it. Apparently there is a bit of a learning curve. And I don't know if you guys have heard, but sometimes Bucho, when he's hosting, he jumps in. He's trying to talk and you guys can't hear him. And we got to tell him, Bucho, we see that your icon on Discord is green, but we can't hear you. And that's because, again, it takes a little bit of getting used to, because there's a button there that makes you mute yourself, but people can still hear you. And then there's another one that actually mutes you. So it's a bit, there's one that actually mutes everybody else, but it doesn't mute you. So it can get complicated. But like I said, we're going to be talking about old-timey boxing. And when I say old-timey, it can be anything from 20 years ago to 100 years ago. But before Chief gets here, because he said he had a couple of errands to run, B. Wayne in the chat says, Henry Cooper versus Zhang. I got Zhang first round KO. Well, that's the thing about old-timey boxing. When you talk about, I mean, if you look at any list of the top British boxers of all time, you're going to get some guys from the 1910s. 1910s to 1930, and then you watch the footage, and these guys look stiff. Looks like you could take him on a fight. I'm not saying that would have been possible in a boxing match, but boxing at one point was at one stage, and now it's at another. Boxing, contrary to what some of these old heads want to tell you, when I say old heads, I'm talking about some of the ones that I used to talk to back in the day, who actually grew up in the 40s and 50s, and they kept telling you, oh, back in my day. That's why I try to very carefully not to sound that way. But there were some limitations back in the day. I mean, Bob Fitzsimmons, I did, when the build-up to the Crawford-Canelo fight, I did a video about when smaller guys managed to beat the supposedly bigger guys. Bob Fitzsimmons is one of the guys who won the middleweight title, one of the only ones, by the way, and then won the heavyweight title. This was way back in the day, almost 100 years ago. And back in those days, those guys didn't defend their titles, really. I mean, they would win one title. It was almost like a carnival thing. They would win the title, then they would fight a bunch of non-title fights, and then it was a big deal when they would defend it. So it's not like today where people really harp on how many defenses has a guy made. So we're going to be talking about stuff like that throughout this show. However, before the Chief Rooney gets here, there's a lot to talk about. In the news here, somebody just alerted us to these tidbits of news. In fact, somebody did so in the chat as well. And what we get here is, that's right, the comeback of Errol Spence. Errol Spence will be returning against Tszyu, according to Mike Coppinger. Hopefully that wasn't the fake Mike Coppinger, because I think there's a fake one, right? Or a fake Michael Benson? I forget. But they're talking about that. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, fellas. Is that a good fight for Errol Spence? Is it too much too soon? Because let's face the facts. The guy hasn't fought since 2023. He took a shellacking against Terence Crawford. And even before that, he wasn't really looking all that well. Now, Team Tszyu really seems to have, I wouldn't say regressed. I think maybe he got, and again, I hate to use this word, but maybe he got exposed. Maybe he didn't really have that heart of the tiger or the eye of the tiger and the heart of a lion. Well, maybe he did have the heart of a lion, the lion from The Wizard of Oz. Lack of heart. Now, wait a minute. Which one was the one without the heart? He was the one without the courage, right? I never really did understand that movie. All I remember that there's a midget hanging in the background. There's an urban legend that there's a midget that killed himself in the background and you can actually watch him. But anyway, the point is that it might be too. I don't see this ending well for Errol Spence because again, say what you want about Team Tszyu. The guys who have beaten him, first of all, Murtazaliev knocked his ass out, and that guy can crack. He's got one punch knockout power. And then Sebastian Fundora finally learned how to use his height and reach, beat him from afar, and ended up making him quit. Errol Spence doesn't have that height. He doesn't have that range, sense of control, at least not anymore, I don't think. And he doesn't hit as hard as Murtazaliev. So really, how do you see him beating Team Tszyu? I mean, I know Team Tszyu turned out not to be what people expected, but at this point, it seems to me he's a hell of a lot better than what we've seen from Spence. So who knows what's going to happen in that one? Very curious to see if that even comes across, to fruition, because maybe some people should be stepping in there and helping Errol Spence out. And this is the thing, though. Errol Spence has balls because he came back from that accident and didn't take a tune-up. He went straight to Danny Garcia. And again, Danny Garcia, say what you want about the guy. He's a top contender. And Errol Spence beat him. Now, we did see certain things in there that made us realize he wasn't the same Errol Spence as before, but nevertheless, he beat him. So that's the type of confidence Errol Spence has. But I really do think a tune-up, and I'm talking a real tune-up here. I'm talking a bottom-of-the-barrel top 30 guy. Bottom 30 guy. Get in there with one of those guys. Don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid. Don't let people shame you. Who's this dude? Who's this tomato can? Guy's been out of the ring for almost 3 years. Took a shellac in his last fight. He's been living a hard life with the alcohol and God knows what. So that's what I think. What are people saying in the chat here real quick? Shout out to everybody in the chat. By the way, I forgot to say shout out to everybody in the chat. Might as well do that. Shout out to Del Boy. Shout out to Del Boy right there. Shout out to Adam Hurley. Says Spence is the one that should be taking a warm-up, but it's a good fight. Exactly. JumpTube says, LOL, Tszyu actually turned out to be what people expected. Standing in front of people and firefighting gets you knocked out. And by the way, I mentioned Murtazaliev. People in the Discord, I'm telling you, these people are vicious. It's not just Amok who takes people's names, of boxers' names, and then transmutes them into something embarrassing. I think was it Boxiana in the Discord? He said, we were talking about how Murtazaliev lost to Josh Kelly and what he did wrong and all that, and then he goes, Murtazaliev can't cut the ring off. And I just burst out laughing, like, come on, is that necessary to call the guy Murtazaliev? And then there was another, I forget, there was another one right afterwards. Somebody started calling another fighter, they started distorting his name. It's going to come back to me, but so far, Amox is the best. When he called Madrimov Mad Rim Job. Pretty good. More BDC says guys like Ali and Larry Holmes would be light heavyweights and cruiserweights today. I don't know about Ali. Didn't he weigh like 215? He was like 6 feet 3 inches tall and about 215. I mean, if we're talking about Cassius Clay, when he was Cassius Clay, he was slim. When he became Muhammad Ali and after the layoff and all that, then he became a little bit more, packed a couple of pounds more. Jaime Raiden says, funny enough, it appears that Tszyu will be the one taking a tune-up first. Exactly. Well, didn't he just take a tune-up? He beat up a guy in his last fight, right? I forget the guy's name, who was actually pretty decent, the guy he fought. But it just shows that Tszyu, even though wasn't what people expected, still pretty good. Pretty good. Del Boy says the Tszyu fight will tell us where Spence is at. I mean, I think he's going to end up right where he's been the last couple of years, out of the ring. I think Tszyu's going to... It's a dangerous fight for Errol Spence, but you got to give him credit. Owen Foster says about between Spence and Tszyu kind of makes sense. Both aren't looking too hot anymore. Spence is pretty much brain damaged now. If he loses, call it quits forever. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what they're expecting. That the organizers of this event, that look, people know that Errol Spence is probably not where he was 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, or 4 rather. But Team Tszyu turns out has got a lot of weaknesses. I mean, boxing fans seldom forget a guy who quits. Seldom do people forget that. Now there is a way out of the I quit. I mean, again, hey, by the way, we're gonna talk about this with Chief when he gets here. Ring Magazine just made available. Well, not just a couple of days ago, made available the digital archives. They digitized all these magazines that they had, 100 years worth of magazines of Ring issues, and they made it available. And no, I'm not just talking, the issue, even the collector's items, the issues that they had there. For example, Bernard Hopkins versus Oscar De La Hoya. I remember I bought that one. It was a special edition, and it was all about that one fight. It's falling apart because since it had so many pages, I think they decided, you know what? It's got about 50 more pages than the average issue. Let's save some money because, again, they got to print more. Let's go with a cheaper paper. And this thing, it's been falling apart since I bought it no, when did I buy it? July, I think, July 2004. So now that it's digitized, I don't have to worry about handling it and it falling apart like it's one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I'm very, I was supposed to be doing other stuff these last couple of days. I find myself going back to the digital archives and I'm spending about an hour in there going through all these articles and all these issues that I've wanted to read for years, and I couldn't get my hands on these issues. You go on eBay, I used to pay 10 buckaroos for each issue. You buy them on eBay, it's about 5 times that. So, I mean, I didn't want to go through that whole hassle. It's a principle thing too. You really want to spend $50 on a magazine? Carl, aka the Boxing Kangaroo, says Tim, for a limited fighter, has gone a hell of a long way. He's the biggest name in Australian boxing today. He has slowed down from a few beatings. Yeah, I mean that's to be expected. Some of the fights that he took. But hey, by the way, I was talking with Boxing Kangaroo a couple of days ago, and we were talking about how Australia, for being such a secluded place, because I mean it really is. It's a giant island separated from the rest of the world. Actually has made and created a couple of very good fighters. And I forgot to mention one, Johnny Famechon. I think he was of Italian descent, but he's the guy. He was a featherweight or super bantamweight, I forget. But he's another dude that was at the top of his game back in the day. So forgot to mention that. All right, Boxing Chief wants to jump on here. Okay, and before I continue, real quick, another piece of news. This is from Ring Magazine. They're talking about. Hold on, where is it? They're talking about Jaron Ennis versus. That's not it. Jaron Ennis versus Virgil Ortiz, almost set for an April clash. Fellas, if you thought we were done with big-time fights that create a lot of controversy and which rile people up here in the YouTube boxing community, you ain't seen nothing yet. This one is going to rile people up, and if it does happen, I know I'm hoping it does. I know we've got a couple of panelists who believe that this fight will never happen, or at least not in the near future, but if it does come to fruition, and it's not even for the top spot at 154. That would have to be between Virgil Ortiz and Fundora. But still, it's between two guys who are undefeated, big punchers, who should have fought for the top spot at 147 years ago, and yet now it's happening at 154. Fellas, I look at me. I don't know what to say. It's that would be, and in April, usually these fights they hold them off until September, right? You know what? If it does happen, and I'm pretty sure the Sheik is going to be behind this. Thank whoever's making this fight that they're not doing the old switcheroo where they go, well, let's put him in a tune-up first in the same card, and then we'll say, no. Just put him in there already, all right? If they lose, no one's gonna say, oh, their career is ruined or this and that. So that's what we're looking at there. And also, I wanted to talk about real briefly about the Heartbreak Kid creates heartbreak in Liverpool. We had a fight this past Saturday between Omar Figueroa and Nick Ball. A lot of people were talking about whether Nick Ball could take on Naoya Inoue if Inoue ever moved up to 126. Well, those plans have been pushed aside as now Figueroa becomes one of the top dogs in the featherweight division. It was a good fight. It was a competitive fight. I thought Nick Ball was edging it with his flashier shots because you had to assume the judges were going to give it to him based on his cleaner work upstairs. But Figueroa actually showed signs of a boxer, kind of like Fundora. Actually used his height and reach to annoy Nick Ball. And then in the end, all of a sudden, Omar Figueroa shows us he can crack. Caught Nick Ball, dropped him. There was a bit of a melee after the fight, a couple of kicks. There was a guy by the name of Andrew Kane, I believe, tried to plant a couple of kicks on Omar Figueroa's behind. I think Figueroa is the heartbreaker. This guy tried to be the ass breaker. That used to be my nickname, by the way. But so it was, it was a kind of a bad thing. it certainly wasn't Marvin Hagler versus Alan Minter type of affair. There weren't any bottles being thrown into the ring, but it was still a bad look, and a lot of people were talking about that on the Twitter. But nevertheless, Figueroa becomes one of the top dogs. And let me tell you something, featherweight remains one of the hottest divisions in boxing. You got Figueroa, you got Bruce Shushu Carrington, you got Angelo Leo, you got El Divino Espinoza, and Curiel, no, what's his name? Not Curiel, the Argentinian guy. I can't believe I forget his name. He's got a left hook. He's not Mexican, but he's Argentinian, and yet he's got a left hook reminiscent of Julio Cesar Chavez. There's not a whole bunch of guys out there who have that type of left hook in boxing anymore, and this dude has it. Undefeated, 25 years old. He did struggle when he fought on the PBC a year ago, 2 years ago? But he's only 25, he's learning. And the Argentinians, just like the Brits, every once in a while they just keep on, they produce a lot of contenders, a lot of gatekeepers, but every once in a while they produce one guy that you go, whoa, will he be that guy? And I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Speaking of names,
so how do you pronounce the last name Cuello in Spanish?
C-U what?
It would be, if you're thinking, I'm looking up on BoxRec,
Uh-huh.
It would be Uniform Echo Lima Oscar.
Okay, come on. Just tell me the name, please.
I don't know how to pronounce it. So,
write it in the chat. Write it here in the Discord thing.
Got you. Okay, one second.
So yeah, finally we got the Chief Aruni jumping in, and we're just going to talk about a couple of things. But I want to pick his brain about a discussion that I heard over at IBFP. Shout out to IBFP. And this was a couple of weeks ago. I want to say they were talking about Alexander Usyk versus Lennox Lewis. Cuello. That's how you pronounce it, Chief. Cuello. That's the guy I'm talking about. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, you know, Chief, I know you like body punching. You should watch this kid. I don't like referring to these guys as kids, but you should watch this guy. Pretty good.
Look,
pretty good.
You mentioned Chavez, Prime Chavez, so I'm going to go look him up definitely.
Mirko Cuello. That's his name.
You all know it's one of my favorites was Julio Chavez growing up. So,
all right, I want to talk about quitting in boxing later, because that's one of the things that I was talking to the people here. But shout out to everybody in the chat so far. Let me just give you a big shout out because I didn't get a chance to do that. Shout out to Bulbous, shout out to JumpTube, Owen Foster, BBC Ingenuity, John Locke is God. Well, look at that. We have a philosopher in there. Double L, B. Wayne, Earl Stevens. Who else we got here? Sergeant Apollo, Earl Stevens. Shout out to Earl. Sam Rando, the Boxing Kangaroo. Shout out to him. Who else we got? Sean Rain, Blue Tack, James Jonah Jameson, Timmy, and a whole bunch of other people. Revolucion. Shout out to Revolucion. I didn't see him there. Shout out to Revolucion. And by the way, I heard that, first of all, Don Chingazos is back. Haven't heard from him in a while. I heard Brian Harkin was on Friday. I hadn't heard from him in a while. I heard Uncle Pete was over at Sobers the other day. Shout out to Uncle Pete. And who else am I forgetting? On Joe. Shout out to JDA. A lot of the old school guys, well, I shouldn't say old school, but a lot of the guys that were missing for a while are making a comeback. And like Don Chingazo said, maybe the Sheik had a little bit something to do with that. Maybe the Sheik is bankrolling some of these dudes to come back into the fold. All right, but Chief, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a very loose show. We're just gonna go from subject to subject. Might be contemporary, might be from the past, whatever. But let's start with that, because you and I have had those same old discussions: Ali versus Tyson, Tyson versus Holyfield. You know, if Tyson would have been the 1980s Tyson, blah blah blah. But one that I don't recall talking about was the one that I heard over at IBFP, which was Alexander Usyk versus Lennox Lewis, and this comes on the heels of a lot of discussion about where Usyk ranks in the heavyweight halls. And James Toney recently said he doesn't think Alexander Usyk is anything special. But just bear in mind, James Toney doesn't think anyone is special. He thinks he still has that mentality of, if you put him in front of me right now, I'll whip him. So don't take what he says too seriously. He's kind of joking around a little bit there. But Chief, yes, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Alexander Usyk, Lennox Lewis, 2 heavyweight champions, 2 Olympic gold medalists. How do you see that one going?
So, based off of history of how he got his title shot, Usyk, if that would have been Lennox Lewis instead of AJ, I don't think Lewis would have taken the fight. I think it would have given the belt. Well, look what he did with Chris Bird and John Ruiz.
Wait a minute.
So, but hear me out. Hear me out. Lennox Lewis is sitting at the top, and he only wants 8-figure or high paydays for the rest of his career, because the first 8-figure payday he got, if memory serves, was Holyfield. Then he got another one in the Holyfield rematch, one with Michael Grant, one with Tua, and one with Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was seven figures and below. Mind you that his shot against Razor Ruddock wasn't even $1 million. That might come back up later. There's a reason why I put that out there. But point being, he was only looking for like really legacy money fights by the time he was undisputed, especially towards the end. So when it came time for an easy payday against John Ruiz, who, by the way, I've said on here many times over, I'm not trying to overhype John Ruiz, but he earned that shot. After getting knocked out by Tua, he went through a long winning streak with some decent wins along the way, including over a climbing James Thunder, and Lennox Lewis just dismissed him. Chris Bird earned his shot by beating David Tua and becoming number one contender.
Mm-hmm.
Lennox Lewis missed him. So now, based off of these situations, you're going to say that this cruiserweight is going to come up and demand a title shot from the heavyweight champion of the world. You owe it to me. If it wasn't in his best interest and he wasn't going to be able to command an 8-figure payday, what makes you think he would have taken that fight?
Well, I mean, we're talking about the Lennox Lewis who had unified the division.
Exactly.
So he
gave those
felt
belts up he got him.
right. So he beat Holyfield in 1999, and thereafter, I think he only fought a handful of times. Well, he fought Michael Grant, Francois Botha. Correct me if I'm wrong here. The order.
Yeah, Grant
Michael
first.
Grant, Francois Botha, Hasim Rahman, I think, when he lost. Then he
That was, but the belt was no longer undisputed by then because I believe the WBA had dropped off. No, wait a minute.
right. But we can still agree that there was no dispute that he was still the champ.
No, I understand. My point is, he was the one that wanted to call all shots, and if this cruiserweight's going to come up who hasn't proven himself, and it wouldn't have gotten him the money he wanted, I don't think Lewis would have taken the fight.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion, based off of what he actually did in the heavyweight division. Two guys that I'm sure we all believe he would have beaten in John Ruiz and Chris Bird. There's not a single person out there that thinks he would have lost those fights. Myself included, and most people like to say I'm a quote unquote Lewis hater.
Mm-hmm.
What I am is I'm objective towards what he really did in the ring. He was he looking after the career he was trying to do and make sure he was getting the paydays that Holyfield and Tyson were getting throughout their careers as heavyweights of 8 figures apiece. If Usyk wasn't going to command that for him to where he was going to be able to get that, I don't think he would have fought him. That's just my opinion, but I'm going off of how he acted as champion.
Okay, now, well, that's fair enough.
If he would have been offered $10 to $15 million for that fight, then yeah, he would have taken it in a heartbeat because he thought it would. I guarantee he would have thought it would have been easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Stewart wouldn't have. Stewart would have realized the fact it wasn't going to be an easy fight, but Lennox might have thought it would have been easy.
Well, I mean, I'm still curious though, and again, the Ring Magazine archives are available, so I can refresh my memory by dipping into those later on. But after he beats Holyfield, and by the way, he didn't have an easy time with Holyfield the second time around, but afterwards he beats Michael Grant, and credit to Lennox Lewis, because even though Michael Grant wasn't all that, he was a giant, he was young, and he was the guy that HBO was pushing there for a while to get a shot at the title, and Lennox Lewis fought him, and he didn't beat him cleanly, you know, when you're grabbing a guy behind the head, but whatever. Then he beats Francois Botha, perennial contender. I forgot, like Butcher reminded me, David Tua in November 2000, yes. I believe. That's a guy that a lot of people want to see him fight. Then he takes on Hasim Rahman. So by then, would it be, after he beat Tua, would it be fair to say that he was just gunning for that Mike Tyson payday? Because what else was there for him?
Well, he was gunning for whatever was going because he was entertaining fighting Roy Jones after the John Ruiz fight because that would have gotten him those paydays I was talking about, 8 figures or more. But so he would have entertained Roy Jones, who was a natural middleweight at best, but he wouldn't fight Chris Bird. He wasn't a mercenary out for hire, but he definitely wanted to make sure he was going to be, whatever was going to do the best for Lennox Lewis's bank account is what he was looking for. And there's no blame for that. I'm not sitting here trying to say he was a coward because he only wanted money. What I'm trying to say is that if someone wouldn't have fit that bill that could have gotten him what he wanted out of it, then I don't think he would have taken it. In regards to the Michael Grant fight, the way you can call a left-handed compliment if you want to, the way I try to give Lewis credit for that is he exposed Michael Grant. everyone built him up. Michael Grant was mentally not as tough as ever. When things were going his way, he looked great. Second, things got tough. He didn't quit against Andrew Galata, but he didn't dig deep to try and fight anything. Galata quit in that fight. He
That's
was
an
not
interesting
winning.
point.
Wasn't digging deep and taking the fight to him. He was there, quote unquote, surviving. And then Galata, for some reason, he hurt Galata late, and then Galata quit.
And it wouldn't be the first time.
Right. It
Not the
wasn't
last
the first
time.
time.
It wouldn't be the last time. Well, I mean, he quit against Bo in a way, which
Yeah,
nobody
those
knows
low
why.
blows in that second fight, he threw those low blows to get out of the tough fight. He was mentally checked out.
Okay, but let's get to the actual fight, because it seems like you're prevaricating here a little bit. Seems like you don't really want to tell us what you think about Lewis versus Usyk. What's going on here, Chief? Who wins if they actually fight? Forget the politics, forget the what if. If you put him in the ring, who wins between Lennox Lewis and Alexander Usyk?
Oh, well, some people are going to not be surprised when I pick Usyk in this situation, but how many southpaws did Lennox Lewis face and look good against? He
Somebody
wouldn't
asked that
fight.
in the chat.
He never called out Michael Moore when they were both champions. After Moore beat Holyfield the first time, he gave up a belt instead of fighting Chris Bird. So, again, going back to the fact this tall, skilled southpaw's coming at me, that wouldn't be surprised the fight didn't happen. But if they do, I'm not positive he's going. I don't think his jab, even though sometimes he measured with it, was something he used against orthodox fighters to nullify their timing and everything else. Well, Stu once asked me, whoever out jabbed Lennox Lewis. Well, let's see. Sim Rotman in the first fight, Ray Mercer, and Vitaly Klitschko, and that's after Emmanuel Stewart took over his career. So imagine if Usyk, who's more well-rounded and a lot more of a cerebral fighter than all three of those guys put together, well, he gets his jab going, it's going to nullify Lewis's. And as the southpaw, he's going to see where all those openings are. Lewis is going to have to look for him.
Well, I am cursing. The chat says that Chris Bird dog is a big deal, and that's true. I mean, look, everything you're saying is true. But if I may add, just look at the flip side to that coin, because again, this is a fantasy fight, and we're just throwing things out there. Yeah. On the one hand, the reason why I'm compelled to agree with you on first glance is because Lennox Lewis, again, gold medalist like Usyk, good jab. Would it be fair to say that he's a little bit of a mix between Joshua and Tyson Fury? Two guys that Usyk ended up beating at heavyweight? A little bit.
Hits as hard as Joshua, is sculpted and athletic like Joshua, but the way he moves, even though it wasn't as graceful, it was still very coordinated for a very large man. And it was kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for. You got a better vocabulary than I do, but an anomaly, I think, is what I'm looking for, about a big guy that looks clean. That's what Tyson Fury is, and that's kind of what Lennox Lewis was. So yeah, that's a very good comparison of combining those two together.
Because he's not as loosey-goosey as Tyson Fury, but he's certainly not as stiff as Anthony Joshua. And by the way, Anthony Joshua, one of the things people don't give him credit enough for is that he's actually got pretty good footwork when he wants to get on the back foot and just box, like he did against Andy Ruiz, like he did a little bit against Jermaine Franklin. The guy's got good footwork. I don't think you get to this point in the heavyweight division, at the top of the heavyweight division, like he did for a while there, without having good, competent footwork. So Lennox Lewis had a little bit of all those things. However, one of the things that makes me agree with you about Usyk beating him is that Lennox Lewis, if you look at his fights, especially during his tenure with Emmanuel Stewart, what was one of the things Emmanuel Stewart was always compelling him to do? Go out there for the kill. Lennox Lewis, for a guy who was 6 feet 5 inches tall or thereabouts, 230 pounds or 230 plus pounds, who could hit like a mule. I've talked about that before with Chief, about that guy on Sherdog, or I think it was another forum, I forget which one, who said he sparred Holyfield, Lewis, old George Foreman, Vladimir Klitschko, and I forget who else. I think David Tua too. He said Lennox Lewis was unpleasant to spar because he was dangerous to spar him, because he could knock you out with a right hand, the uppercuts, and I'm pretty sure that left hook didn't feel all that great either. So Lennox Lewis was a dangerous guy, but he certainly didn't seem to believe that himself. In fact, here's another one. Remember when he fought Tyson And then Miles Stewart's telling him, this guy is done. Get him out of there. Why you keep probing with the jab, trying to outbox this dude? And here's another piece of evidence for you. There's that documentary in the build-up to the first Holyfield fight. And Lennox Lewis is sparring Jeremy Williams, who was a fringe contender at the time. Yeah. And Lennox Lewis is sparring him, and he's just jabbing him, like really not a lot of push. And Stewart is telling him, look, you're better than this dude. You got him beat with the jab. Now add something behind that. I'm paraphrasing here, but he was essentially chastising him for you're being too passive. So would you agree that if you're that way against Usyk, that's essentially what Usyk wants? He's faster with his feet, faster with his hands, just as smart, if not maybe a little bit smarter than Lewis. I don't know. That's up for debate. Is that a bad style matchup then for Lennox Lewis? What do you think, Chief?
Well, first of all, I'll stake my reputation. Anybody wants to debate the fact that he's smarter than Lennox Lewis in the ring. Usyk has got one of the boxing IQs of the past several eras. Having said that, Lennox Lewis does have certain athletic abilities to nullify high IQs. But again, against a jabbing... Well, first of all, I was going to say this in regards to the result to Tszyu and Shakur, and that's the fact that a southpaw is a tough fighter to beat. Not just one that's good off the front foot altogether, but one that really uses the jab and is accurate with it and doesn't have to paw with it, but really sticks it. Wink, you're right. Perfect example. If you can't break their timing with that jab, they're a hard fighter to beat. Period. Full stop. Well, guess what? Usyk is a very good jabbing southpaw, and he's a heavyweight jabbing southpaw, which blinds you from some of the other shots that are going to be coming your way that he's going to be able to sneak in because he's a jabbing southpaw. And I just think that's going to cause immense problems for Lennox Lewis. The only thing I can see is if he grabs and hold. Now, unlike Joshua, Lennox had no problem grabbing, holding, leaning, and then holding and hitting behind the head like he did to Michael Grant. He has no problem with that. That's what everyone was saying. If Joshua does that to Usyk, he should win. They were probably right. Guess what? Not in his makeup. He didn't know how to do it. Lewis does. So but we thought the same thing if Fury was going to do that, and Fury does know how to do that, and it still didn't work. A much bigger, heavier man than maybe not hit. Maybe he doesn't hit as hard, but he's a much bigger, heavier man than Lennox Lewis is Tyson Fury, and that still didn't work. Usyk still figured it out and still found a way to win. Now, Lennox Lewis, I do believe, is a better athlete and a better fighter than Tyson Fury. But my point is, the style that everyone's going to think might work for Lennox of he can grab and maul and lean and everything else, well, so could Tyson Fury, and that didn't work. So I think he's just too smart to be completely outdone and outclassed by Lennox. Now, I'm not saying Lennox couldn't knock him out if you landed with the right shot. That's not any... That never left my mouth. But I don't know if that... Excuse me. I don't know if that shot's going to land because I just think Usyk's too smart. He's not going to let himself be in that position.
Right. And you know what? Like a lot of these fantasy matchups, who knows how it would have gone down. I'm still thinking about Canelo Crawford and how I was 60-40 on Canelo, which is about as sure as you can get when it's a fight between two top guys, despite the weight thing. And it didn't turn out the way I expected. So you never know. It's these fantasy matchups. They're never going to happen. But you can look at everything. Because let me read a couple of here of things of what people are saying. Because somebody in the chat, for example, said, hold on, where was it? Somebody was talking about, okay, B. Wayne says, an old, out-of-shape Mercer and Bruno, who made his debut in 82, were out jabbing Lennox. Vitaly completely took Lewis's jab away. You know, see, that's, you can look at these fights on paper or not on paper, but you can look at some of those past fights and go, well, because of this, I don't think that this guy beats that dude. But then again, some people can power up in fights when they matter most. So, I don't know, man. I mean, I still remember, though. Let me throw a different view on this. Tyson Fury, whom a lot of people expected to be easy work for Usyk, at least that version of Fury in 2024, actually gave Usyk hell for 6 rounds. Usyk said that there was a point where he took a counter uppercut and he felt like going down, and he actually thought about going down, but he said, only God kept me up. Maybe I'm paraphrasing here, but so what I'm trying to say is, it's not like the Joshua fights were easy. The first Fury fight certainly wasn't. The Chisora fight wasn't easy. And I'm not saying that he didn't win those fights decisively. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that he won those fights, but he had to redline it. His engine was going at 100% and he was pushing it. He didn't just show up there and, I'm at
No,
50%. I'm just going to play around. I'm going to beat these guys. No, he had to. These dudes are big compared to him. He's got to work.
very true. Very true. He would have to work, but he knows how to do that. And he doesn't shy away from it. He trains for it. He prepares for it. And he knows how to pace himself. He knows when to back off. He knows when to dig for the second win. But one more thing in his favor is he still doesn't get hit overly clean with a lot of big shots very often.
That's true.
Lewis, we're just going to start Lennox Lewis's first heavyweight title run. He destroys Razor Rhoda. Got it. Then he gets staggered. He wins the WBC out of the ring. He gets staggered multiple times by Tony Tucker. He gets staggered by Phil Jackson, who's a natural cruiserweight. He gets staggered by Frank Bruno on multiple occasions. Then he gets knocked out by Oliver McCall, and that's his first heavyweight reign. He gets Emmanuel Stewart. He gets stunned right away by, I forget the guy's name. Oh, wait a minute. I think I'm looking at his career right now. So, Lionel Butler. I don't know who Justin Fortune is. I know who he is, but I don't remember that fight. He takes out shot Tommy Morrison, gets staggered multiple times.
And the AIDS infected Tommy Morrison.
Right. Almost gets dropped by Henry Akinwande. Gets staggered all over the place by Shannon Briggs. Gets stunned a few times by the Croatian guy.
Wait a minute. See, that's why people say you hate Lennox Lewis. He got staggered all over the place. I mean, that was what? That was one spot in that fight?
No, it was in more than one. It was in the first 2 or 3 rounds.
Okay.
It wasn't until like midway third or the fourth when Briggs blew his load and had a quote unquote asthma attack that Lennox took over. And let's also face the fact that fight was ended by Briggs taking a wild shot that he missed and went down, and the referee stopped it. It wasn't stopped for a punch. So just to call that to what it is. So he was stunned multiple times against Holyfield, I mean to say, and he was knocked out by Hasim Rahman, and they were staggered several times by Klitschko. Now, these guys are bigger punchers than Usyk. I think Usyk kicks about as hard as Holyfield. And yes, everyone's going to say the roided Holyfield. Gotcha. Understood. But he hits about as hard as that. So when we go into the whole thing, Usyk's got enough power to stun Lennox Lewis. He may not be enough to finish him off, but he's got enough to stun him enough times to where Lewis is going to have to turn this fight with his power, with whatever he can muster by being the bigger man and possibly better athlete. I'm not saying he was, but it's a possibility he was. But that's what he's going to pull that off. Aside from that, you're talking about a better mover, a lighter on his feet, faster handed, much more accomplished amateur. Even though Lennox Lewis did have a gold medal, he didn't have as many amateur fights as Usyk. Usyk had hundreds. Lennox Lewis, I don't even think had 90. I might be off a little bit. Matter of fact, since I'm on BoxRec, I'll look that part up and correct myself if I need to. But I know he didn't have over 100. Listed as 85 and 9, so I'm not great at math, but he was right at the like the low 100s, whereas I'm pretty sure Usyk had over 200.
Yeah, I think that's the story on Usyk. But yes, go ahead.
So, bottom line is like the higher IQ is definitely going to be Usyk. The nimbler fighter, even though Lennox was a good athlete, was going to be Usyk. And you can't take away the fact that this is a jabbing southpaw that knows how to box and how to fight. So even though everyone's going to talk about how Lennox was a master of his day, and he was, it's not like he's facing this like small guy that doesn't have a chance. He's facing very cerebral, smart, intelligent, great boxer that knows how to take on all comers, analyze everything, and so far has undisputedly come out on top I don't know of a single controversial fight he's had at heavyweight.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose maybe the first Fury fight, some people try to make it out to be that he shouldn't have won that one. By the way, shout out to Bucho, who just started a poll here in the chat, and he says, who wins, Lewis or Usyk? And right now, 63% of the people say Usyk. Also, an interesting question here from Bucho. We heard from Chief about who would win between Usyk and Fury. Excuse me, Usyk and Lewis. Who had or who faced, he says, the better opposition?
Well, now that's the different. Well, okay, let's analyze this.
Mm-hmm.
Holyfield was past his days. Tyson was past his best days. Lewis wasn't young either when those fights happened, so I'm going to be fair there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's prime Holyfield for Tyson. Frank Burna wasn't a spring chicken. Who else did he? Tony Tucker was almost shot. He exposed Razor Ruddock to be overrated.
Frank Bruno,
Tommy Moore.
what about him?
Frank Burna was, he went on to win the title after that, but it was against Oliver McCall. So, and McCall broke down and cried in tears from a crack withdrawal against Lennox Lewis in the rematch. So we don't know how good.
Come on. I think we can all sympathize with that. I think some of us have been there.
Well, my point is the fact that it wasn't Lennox a crack withdrawal.
Right.
Briggs was never that good. He exposed Galata. I got it. When I say exposed of Michael Grant and Galata, I got to get that. That's the, if you want to say it's a left-handed compliment, so be it. I'm giving him credit for the fact that Galata was on a high streak at the time, and he knocked Galata out in the first round, and nobody thought. I'm giving him props where props are due. Michael Grant was, I don't know about the betting favorite, but a lot of people were thinking he could pull off that upset. And Lennox, even though he finished him off with holding and hitting him, he didn't drop him for the first time by holding and hitting him. He was beating that man up. Mm-hmm. One-sidedly. Grant landed one good right hand for half a second. The rest of and that was like in the first couple seconds. All Lennox Lewis after that, completely. And David Tua won the fight.
Excuse me,
he owned David. I said David Tua was never in that fight. He owned David Tua. You could have called that 120 to 109.
109, yeah.
Or 109.
And but listen, David Tua, he wasn't exactly facing killers over at Showtime, but he wasn't having a hard time with them either. I mean, he was wiping the floor with guys like Obed Sullivan and all that, knocking them out. So, you got to give him credit for that one, to Lewis.
I just did. I said he owned him.
There you go. I will say this though, or ask rather. So he had the two. Did you mention Ray Mercer? What was your take on the Mercer fight?
Mercer was old and out of shape, but still almost possibly should have won that fight. I know a lot of people think that he did, and there are times when I score it that I do think it could have been close to a draw, but there are other times I score it for Mercer. I don't know if I've ever scored it completely for Lennox, because there are just too many rounds, especially the early rounds when Mercer was landing that jab and then falling with the right hand, that Lennox just couldn't stay steady on his feet and had to go against the ropes. And the times that Mercer was hurt, he fought his way back into the round. So, slightly controversial, but it showed how tough Lennox was in that fight, because I thought Lennox had a glass jaw. If he had a glass jaw, he knocked down that fight.
Exactly. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like Tua never really caught him, Mercer caught him a bunch of times. Like you say, he never recreated the Tommy Morrison stoppage. So you got to, Lennox Lewis was good, very good. But that's one of those fantasy matchups that maybe one day, maybe in the afterlife, we get to see it in some sort of like major tournament, martial arts style, the Quest style. But I want to read a couple of comments here, Chief, from the chat. Chitlin Distributor says, is David Tua related to Hawk? The Hawk Tua girl? No, I don't think they're related. I think that girl is looks like she's from Scottish stock or something, whereas David Tua is pure Polynesian. Timmy says, Usyk's best win at heavyweight is Fury, who couldn't get out of the way of a one-dimensional right hand by a bad boxer in Wilder. I just can't get over that 4 times being dropped is insane. Chief, what are your thoughts on that?
Repeat that one again for me, please.
Timmy says that Usyk's best win at heavyweight is against a Tyson Fury who couldn't get out of the way of Wilder's right hand.
Well, I mean, he still won those fights decisively. I really don't know what the point is, other than the fact that he got a little careless and got dropped a few times by a guy that we know can punch. He got up every time and he won. Well, I mean, if you draw him.
Right. If you want to make the argument that Lewis could beat Fury, that's a good one to make. That the fact that he couldn't get away out of the way of Wilder's right hand, then how's he going to get away from Lewis's right hands? But we're talking about Usyk versus Lewis here, so
right.
But I guess what he's saying is that Fury wasn't all that and still managed to give Usyk the business. So I think that's his argument.
Going to give any heavyweight in history a tough fight. That doesn't mean he beats them all.
Right.
He's very tall. He's very coordinated for a guy his size. He's very heavy. His hands aren't slow, and his knockout percentage is high enough to where against certain fighters, like he destroys Michael Moore. Right? Is that saying a lot? I don't know, but guys that have the weaker chins, he's gonna beat those guys. Now, your tougher guy, can he beat Lennox Lewis? Yes, he can, but he can also lose to Lennox Lewis. Because, like I said, Lennox was a more talented and a higher IQ version of Wilder. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times, especially in the first, when he was the WBC champ, that he got from Tony Tucker, he was just a probing with the left to load up with the right hand kind of fighter. That's what he was. And which is very much like Wilder. That one probably would have lost to Tyson Fury. The one that fought Holyfield in the first fight would have given Fury all sorts of problems unless Fury is able to throw Lennox's timing off, and that's where that part comes into play. Who's controlling the action in that fight is who's going to win it, and if it's Lennox, it's probably going to be by knockout. But if it's Fury, it could be a late stoppage or a decision, because he's not the hardest puncher, but he's not a feather-fisted guy, but he's not a knockout puncher. He accumulates. But I've never seen Lewis beat up to the point of a stoppage. He's usually like cold-cocked.
That's true. That's true. And to your point, there's two comments here that I want to read. But Kua says, Usyk is soft to the silly belly. I mean, it's true that he's been hurt to the body, but Lewis wasn't exactly Ruben Olivares in there. Or Ricky Hatton.
No, he was not a body puncher.
That's what made it frustrating, that he had a good left to the body, but he just didn't seem to. He was content to just jab his way to a decision in a lot of cases. Phil Miles makes a very good point here. He says, Usyk always comes back, though. Every time he seems like he's in trouble, he comes back and swarms mofos. That's to my point, too. That's what I was trying to illustrate about. By the way, can you hear me properly, Chief? Because I think I just realized. Yeah.
No, I hear you fine.
Okay. But what I wanted to say was that's what I was saying earlier about why I would favor Usyk in a Lewis fight, is that Usyk always showed, maybe it's because he was fighting over guys who were bigger than him, but whenever he would be hurt or it seems like he's out of it a little bit, he would rally back. I've never seen an Usyk fight where he's not the stronger guy by the end of it. Against Joshua, against Breedis, against Michael Hunter, against Fury, he's the guy that turns it up. And Lewis, again, go ahead, yeah.
Well, let's add this into the equation. Just because Emmanuel Stewart was his trainer didn't mean he still didn't take guys lightly. He almost lost to Klitschko, and he got knocked out by Hasim Rahman by not taking his training seriously. Is he going to take the small white Ukrainian southpaw that's a cruiserweight seriously? And if he doesn't, he will lose that fight. Whether it's by decision or knockout, he will lose that fight. So if he's not in shape, he will lose to Usyk. Full stop. And there's no coming back from that, because when he didn't show up in shape, the only fight he didn't lose when he didn't show up in shape was because they saved him, saying that one more punch could have taken Vitaly's eye out. Vitaly was defending himself all the way through, and the only punch Klitschko landed legitimately was in the 6th round from holding him with one arm and hitting him with an uppercut with the other, or kidney punching him for 7 punches in a row. That's all he was doing. Those only 2 rounds he won, and it's the foul. So, if he does not show up in shape against Usyk, he will not win.
And that's something that, to Bucho's point about, who faced the better opposition and this and that, when we're judging a guy based on his accomplishments and his skill, one thing that I do give Usyk credit is, out of the many things that I give him credit for, is that he never showed up out of shape. Whereas with Lennox Lewis, like you mentioned, I don't think he was out of shape against McCall, but he got caught. That's a lack of consistency. That's inconsistency. He shows out of shape for the Rahman fight. He shows out of shape for the Vitaly Klitschko fight, which he thought it was going to be Kirk Johnson, but still, why would you take Kirk Johnson's slightly? The guy knocked out Oleg Maskaev with a brutal right hand. If the guy can crack, why would you take him lightly? So Lennox Lewis, it seemed, was a victim of his own skills and talent. He thought he was better than these guys, and he thought that he could cut corners, and it wasn't always the case. So just based off of that. When I'm looking at this Ring Magazine top 20, top 10 articles about, top 10 lightweights of all time, whatever, one of the things that they always add in there, one of the criteria is consistency. And Lennox Lewis, legitimate Hall of Famer, but when you compare him to other Hall of Famers, what was he doing? He was taking fights lightly.
Yeah, and there are some that he took lightly. But I have to come in with the fact that, that I'm reading some of the comments of one person actually said that Lewis destroyed Klitschko. Completely untrue. And some people think that he was a better fighter than Klitschko, and maybe fight prime for prime he was.
Mm-hmm.
At the stage he was at in his career, he was not going to beat Klitschko. So I'm talking about the 30, almost 37, I think he was. There wasn't an amount of shape he was going to be able to get in at that stage of his career and beat Vitaly. The reason why that fight was so competitive was because Vitaly was showing a lot of respect and feeling him out, and just like Lennox, he was preparing for a shorter, less talented fighter. I think he was supposed to fight Cedric Boswell. And so he was also preparing for a shorter, not as talented fighter. And he got thrown in against the champion at the last minute because he was supposed to be on the undercard.
Wait. You're talking about
some
2003?
People are trying to pull this thing. Well,
You're talking about 2003?
Yeah, I'm talking about when Vladimir and Lennox fought. They were supposed to be on the same card. Did I say Vladimir? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, he was supposed to fight Lewis was supposed to fight Kirk Johnson, whose claim to fame had been that he had knocked out Oleg Maskaev.
Yes, but Vitaly was supposed to fight either Cedric Boswell or somebody
okay. I'm sorry.
On the same card. Well, whether it's going to be televised or not, I don't know, but he was supposed to be on there. There is rumor that there is going to be a double header, so it would possibly promote a fight between the two of them. But he was going to be on that card, whether it was going to be televised or not. The bottom line is the fact that they were both preparing for lesser
different
fighters than each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they were shorter fighters that didn't have the same reach and same tools and and even IQs as the people they ended up fighting. So people can try and say, well, Lennox, took the fight to last minute. So did Klitschko. And both of them were preparing for fighters that were nowhere near the same type of fighter that they faced.
Mm-hmm.
Vitaly showed him a lot of respect and to try and get his timing down. He didn't really get to study the timing until the actual fight. And so in a rematch, I'm sorry, unless a cut happened again, I don't think at that stage of Lennox's career, and I'm not saying prime for prime, I'm saying at that stage, you could have given him steroids with a diehard battery and he wouldn't have been able to get in enough shape to beat Vitaly at that stage, because Vitaly was fresher, younger, newer, taller, just as smart, just could hit, and Lennox was on his way out after having a long established heavyweight career. He didn't have what he needed to do to beat a Vitaly anymore. There's other heavyweights he still could have possibly trained and come back from, but Vitaly wasn't one of them.
Well, I'll say this. Lennox Lewis showed up out of shape, and again, it wasn't the first time, and yet he still... Your point stands true. I mean, Vitaly was training for somebody else, but I believe he was also younger than Lewis, or am I mistaken here? He might have been younger by a couple of years. And Lewis still managed to, like you said, remain competitive. Yeah, he had to delve into his bag of dark arts to make it competitive. But I do wonder what would have gone on had they rematched. But to your point, I'm thinking that Lennox Lewis could have... Hold on. I'm thinking that Lennox Lewis could have done this, he could have done that. The difference is, though, it didn't seem like Lewis believed that because he ended up retiring.
Exactly. The WBC forced the person to fight next was going to be Vitaly Klitschko. Now, remember, I'm going to make his face look like a hamburger. I've done this. I've done that. I did all this stuff to him. I beat him so bad. And the WBC said, okay, well, now we're going to give you a chance to do it on pay-per-view. And Lennox goes, the very next day, Lennox goes, oops, I'm retiring.
Mm-hmm.
Another reason people can call me the hater if they want to, but that was kind of unclassy. Now, I don't blame fighters for talking trash. His blood was probably still up from just being a fight. Blah, 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 blah. Get it. Got it. Nobody's perfect. Understood. But to talk that amount of garbage and then to be given the opportunity on a silver platter to make an 8-figure payday to prove your point, and then you turn around just as soon as the WBC drops the mandatory to say, no, never mind, I'm going to retire. There's not a lot of integrity behind that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. By the way, real quick, Never Sobers, shout out to Never Sobers, who says, going live later, guys. I just get a message from Perception. He will be hosting my show again. He's got the steering wheel. I will be riding shotgun. Well, I wouldn't want to be in the same car as Perception, Sobers. I'll just say that. But shout out to Sobers. Everybody go check out his show. I don't know which time they're going to be going on live, but if you want entertainment with people walking the high wire without a safety net, you might want to go check out Never Sobers' channel. That's Never Sobers Reloaded. Go check it out. So, Chief, to your point, yeah, I mean, I think we've talked for almost an hour here about this fight. We could actually talk more about it, but I want to save a little bit of that for later or for another time. As I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to pivot a little bit here to the heavyweight, still staying in the heavyweight division, but like I told you, Ring Magazine made available all the archives for their magazines, 100 years worth of issues. Oh shit, hold on a second. All right, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, that wasn't Never Sobers, man. That actually, hey, Sobers, you should go live anyway and let the Perception have the handle. There's just so many people faking each other's names out there. I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time figuring out who's whom. But yeah, that wasn't the real Sobers. But Sobers, if you're listening, you should actually let Perception host a show. Why not? High entertainment, that's for sure. I think I'm gonna let Perception host a show. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? But Chief, like I was saying, Ring Magazine digitized about 100 years worth of content. So I'm looking back at these magazines, right? And we're talking about the heavyweight division, and some people are saying that somebody in the chat, I forget whom it was, but said that Usyk dominated a weak heavyweight division. I think we need to put things into perspective. And number one, Usyk is not a heavyweight. Some people could say, but come on, he's 6 feet 3 inches tall and he probably walks around 200 plus pounds. Yes, he's a heavyweight. I agree that he's not exactly the most undersized heavyweight out there. He's not exactly Mike Tyson or David Tua. But he's still fighting guys that outweigh him by about 30, 40 pounds. Or in the case of Derek Chisora, I think that dude outweighed him by 36 pounds or maybe more. But the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that people tend to forget that Usyk's really what made him into a pound-for-pound guy was at cruiserweight. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm looking at the May 1996 edition of Ring Magazine. Now, actually, I'm not looking at it now, but I was reading it, and I'm going to put the cover here on the screen. So if people want to go check that out over at Ring Magazine, all you got to do is sign up, put in an email, and at worst, what they're going to do is they're going to spam you with, well, not spam you, but they're going to be sending you ads and all that. Don't worry about it. Just you get access to all the magazines. So this is it, the May 1996 issue of Ring Magazine, which I think actually falls into the February 1996, I believe. But anyway, one of the first parts of that magazine is that they go about with the readers' emails, or not emails, the writing. Back then it was still writing. So one of the readers wrote in and said something interesting, Chief. He said, again, this is from 1996, I was surprised that so many of the insiders you polled thought so little of today's heavyweights, at least in comparison to the Ali Frazier Foreman era. My guess is that most of those polled are in the same age bracket as Ali and Cast, and they look back at the good old days with rose-colored glasses. If you ask me, Bo, Tyson, Holyfield, and Lewis could easily hold their own. As a matter of fact, I like the chances of Bo and Tyson against any of the greats from the 1970s. When comparing eras, one should keep in mind that in most sports, today's top athletes have the benefit of state-of-the-art equipment, facilities, and training techniques. This generally translates to superior skills and abilities. Look at the track and field, weightlifting, football, etc. The results cannot be disputed. Boxing is not an exception. What do you think about that, Chief?
I do it all the time. I'm constantly talking about how the era I grew up in is the welterweight division, especially in the 90s, was better than the one that Spence and Crawford were in. On paper, factually, based off the quality of competition these men faced, I'm right. but that doesn't mean that if you put Spence in with Trinidad, that Trinidad automatically wins just because he fought in a tougher, more polished, better era. So the problem, the distinct difference with heavyweights is that they're the big guys, and even though the max weight limit has changed over the years, the era that he's referring to of Ali Frazier versus the 90s, we're still talking everybody weighing over 200 pounds. Frazier over 200, Foreman was over 200, Ali's over 200. Their entire careers as champions. So 200 what is where you draw the line of how much of a weight advantage everybody would have. And Ali and Frazier and Foreman did have to weigh in the same day and fight that night, whereas Bo and Holyfield and Lewis did not. Give them a chance to rehydrate better, and there's no telling what's going to happen there. How do I compare the eras? I think 195 to 205 pound Evander Holyfield that's ready to go gives everybody in Ali's era the fight of their life and possibly upsets some of them. I think he beats Ken Norton. I think he beats Joe Frazier. I think he could surprise George Foreman. I think he could take his punch. And I definitely think he could give Ali a run for his money because lesser fighters gave Ali a run for his money. And that's the Ali before he got suspended for not doing the draft. So, yeah. I think there are certain men throughout each era that you look at and say, this person's good enough to compete in all these other eras because they're the cream of that crop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, quickly draw close to the point, though, is like Larry Holmes fought guys like Ernie Shavers. Ernie Shavers had a heck of a punch, but he fought a whole lot of people that weren't talented fighters. Would he have lasted in today's era because he had a stamina problem?
True, he could stay in with the champions of the day.
Larry Holmes, but would he have come if he couldn't have landed that punch against Joshua? Would it have been a competitive fight, or Joshua just waited his time out and knocked him out in brutal fashion later? You remember Joshua hit a whole lot harder than Larry Holmes.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, but it just, like I said, it just goes to show you the more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, now we're comparing the today's heavyweights with those in the 90s. And by the way, there's more of a difference now between the 90s, that the epoch we're talking about, than the one that they were talking about. Because they were talking about the 1970s. That was 20-something years. We're talking now 30 years with the 90s or thereabouts. So
you're talking about today versus then?
Yeah, I mean, that just goes to show how old we're getting there, Chief, is what I'm trying to illustrate. But nevertheless, it's a subject that never changes, never dies. People are always going to be comparing the fighters of today with the fighters of the past. If you're enjoying the conversation, don't forget to hit that like, really helps us out. This is a free-flowing, free-form historical show, we could call it, but I mean, we can take it in any direction we want. But shout out to everybody out there so far who's listening to this. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. Timmy T says, if Ken Norton is trash, Ali and Holmes are trash. He's responding to what more BDC said. He said that Ken Norton is trash. Barry Nivola says they do that because if they didn't, they take that away from Ali. Impala says perception has a mangina. Well, there you go. Padokua says Holyfield takes out Usyk. Now, that's an interesting question there, Chief. Does Holyfield have a better chance of beating Usyk than Lennox Lewis did?
Okay, so I don't remember the Southpaws he fought at cruiserweight. Struggled with Michael Moore in 2 fights, even though he was injured in one of them, and he was past his best days when he fought Chris Burge. So that's our gauge of what he could do against Southpaw. If it's Holyfield's will that's going to get him through this fight, then yes, he can win. It wouldn't be a skill situation. That's how he beat Michael Moore in the rematch. He outwilled Michael Moore, and Michael Moore didn't show up in the best shape of the rematch, mind you. But Holyfield was not going to let Michael Moore win that fight, and he did it by consistently throwing combinations, loading up with the right hand, trying everything he could think of in order to make it work. And I know some people go, oh, the headbutts and the low blows. No, that's not what he was doing. He used the jab when he could. He hooked off the jab when he could. He was also advanced in age, so some of his athleticism wasn't the same. But he outwilled Michael Moore that night. Because Michael Moore was hitting him with some good shots, and Holyfield wasn't going to go anywhere. Difference is, Usyk's not Michael Moore. Again, we go back to how smart he is. We go back to, like, something about the way, because he was trained for the most part, I don't know how long, by Lomachenko's dad. There's something about how he broke down the science of boxing and how to win and to fight to these two gentlemen, so that they understood the ins and outs and all the idiosyncrasies in between that goes along with the sport of boxing. It wasn't just that they can box. They also know how to fight. They can do both. They can take it to you, or they can move around the ring and use their combinations. Holyfield could do that too, but now you're talking against a mirror image. And you're talking about a person who's slightly bigger than Holyfield, because Holyfield's 6'2", 77-inch reach, and numerically, Usyk mirrors Ali. Same fingertip to fingertip. He might have shorter arms, but same fingertip to fingertip, same height. And now he's weighing in around the 220s or 230s. Am I correct? When he's fighting at heavyweight?
He was how much, you said?
I'm asking, what's his average weight been, roughly?
Of Usyk, it's got to be about 220 maybe, 215 to 20, I believe.
All right. So he's weighing in more than Holyfield did as a fighter. Holyfield was, I think he might have been 218 against Tyson in the rematch, and that's the heaviest he ever was. Everything else was around 215 or less. So 205 to 215. So at best, one of Holyfield's heaviest weights is Usyk's average. So Usyk's still a bigger man. Not by much, but by enough to where he's going to have advantages over Holyfield. Add in the fact he's a smart southpaw, Holyfield's going to have a tough fight, but Holyfield's a determined enough fighter and can take a good enough punch that Usyk's going to have a rough fight. But I could pick Usyk over Holyfield. You know, that's a big deal to me because Holyfield's one of my favorite heavyweights. But Usyk's he's just on another level than most guys, and because of being a southpaw, that's going to give him an advantage over a lot of these fighters. Most of them haven't fought southpaws, or many of them, and the ones that didn't fight anyone anywhere near as good as Usyk. Whereas Usyk's fought all sorts of right-handed fighters all the way out through his entire life.
Well, I mean, again, I have to go back to that the documentary there from Lennox Lewis where he's preparing for the Holyfield fight. And again, that's a past his peak Holyfield. But Emmanuel Stewart, who trained Holyfield for the second bullfight, I believe, he told Lennox Lewis, and I don't know if he was telling him this to psych him up or whatever, because again, Lennox Lewis needed a fire to be lit under his ass. But he said Holyfield doesn't train hard. Emmanuel Stewart told him that Lewis didn't like doing road work, and that's why he would get tired in certain fights. Specifically, what was the guy's name? The facsimile of Joe Frazier, Philadelphia guy. Bert Cooper, thank you. And in that fight, he sort of seems like he got tired all of a sudden and allowed Bert Cooper to start rallying. So then there's a whole bunch of other fights where he seems to blow his wad, and I don't know, maybe that's because he went overboard or maybe he wasn't in shape, like Stewart said. But nevertheless, one of Usyk's strengths is precisely that: his engine, his willpower, his resolve. That dude will just not quit. That's why I was saying before the Fury fight, the first one, I said, look, you want to stop Usyk, you got to knock him out cold, because if he still has a pulse in there and he's still conscious, he won't stop coming. And, Holyfield has that same mentality, that same heart, but I don't know about the conditioning. He seemed to slack a little bit in there. Inconsistencies again.
Holyfield's stamina situation came with the fact that he liked to swim. He liked to jump rope. He liked, doing I remember when he was training and just becoming a heavyweight, there was it was a set of stairs that kind of went up and then went back down the other side. He liked doing those kind of exercises. He hated running. He loved doing the aerobics. So he was always in condition, but when it came time for that old school running 7 miles, stuff like that, wasn't his favorite thing to do. Not that he didn't do it, but he may not have given it 110%. Bert Cooper fight, one of the reasons why some people thought he might have gotten tired, and Jim Lampley asked this to Glenn Clancy and said, could he be overtrained? Because remember, he was all the way through the Mike Tyson training. That fight was very close to, it was already signed. They were in camp training for that when Tyson got in trouble. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like there were negotiations. They were in training for that. And then he had to stop and then start training again for Francisco Damiani. And then he had to stop and start training again for Bert Cooper. So there was a number of factors on why his conditioning might have been a little bit like loppy jaw, for lack of a better word, in that fight. But for the most part, I never really saw Holyfield as a pro get too tired, except for against Michael Moore. But we also know that was one of the times that the painkillers with the injury in his shoulder and possibly steroids were causing the stiffness in his heart. Maybe he didn't cycle off of them right and all this. So he didn't test positive for that fight, but he definitely looked different. He looked more of a bodybuilder in that fight than he did in any of his others. So having said that, the combination, that's the only other time I ever saw him tired. One tired against, and then, I'm sorry, third Bo fight, but we know he had hepatitis that night. So,
well, I mean, I guess Larry Holmes, I think that, would you agree that had more to do with Holmes playing
he didn't
his
look
own
good against
version?
Holmes, but he didn't look tired against Holmes. Holmes just wasn't giving him any openings. Holmes hit him with, I think, a right uppercut in one of the early rounds, second or third, and it buzzed him a little bit. And he wanted to get even with Holmes, and Holmes didn't give him any more openings. He just stayed against the ropes and stayed closed up, and Holyfield couldn't get the angle to try and do anything. And Holmes just knew how to survive, and he was smart. I didn't see Holyfield get tired in that fight. I saw him get frustrated. And I saw him try to overperform, but Holmes wasn't going to let him look good in that fight.
That's what I was gonna bring up, the fact that was a very wily Larry Holmes, obviously a past his peak Larry Holmes, but nevertheless Larry Holmes would manage to find a balance between getting the most out of his physical abilities or what was left of them and his experience at that point. And he was trying to recreate his own version of Ali Foreman in there. So that's why I wanted to ask, was that really a case of Holyfield tiring, or just, Larry Holmes got to give him his credit for being a wily old fox, as they like to say in England?
The second one, because if Holyfield wouldn't have been in shape, he would have gotten tired, and Holmes would have had the opportunity he wanted, and it just didn't come. Yeah, it didn't come because Holyfield was in shape. Holyfield was ready. He just didn't look. It's kind of like Klitschko against Abragliov. The opponent wasn't going to let the favorite look good. Case closed.
Exactly.
The favorite did what they could try to do to still win the fight, since the opportunity wasn't going to be there for them to look good. They still had to win.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, I mean, that's that Holyfield though. I mean, I maybe Usyk beats him, but I don't see it being easy. I mean, Holyfield was just too tenacious to give anybody. I mean, when he was in his prime, or even a little bit past it, anybody an easy time.
But he was a guy that his offense flowed very well against orthodox fighters. He didn't really do the Philly show, but he would keep that left hand low, and he knew how to block and parry the right hand to block the hook in the right hand at times. That's what Georgie Benton taught him. He was really good at throwing the jab from around chest level. He's good at hooking off of everything. He's good at throwing great combinations. He's extremely accurate. He's great at finishing things with a hook, and that works well against right-handed fighters. But he's going to be fighting Alexander Usyk, who's not a right-handed fighter, and that's why it would be more difficult, because a lot of these combinations aren't going to land the same, and he's going to have to find ways to make them work. So if we're talking Douglas DeBow heavyweight with Georgie Benton making the plan, yeah, I can see Holyfield pulling that off in a tough fight. If we're talking later than that, where Holyfield's going to be trying to do it on his own, even if he has a good corner, but he goes off script, Usyk's going to win that fight.
Well, Chidley Distributor in the chat says Holyfield was juiced to the cheeks. to the cheeks. That should already discount him. I mean, listen, if you're going to ask me, if you're going to hold that gun to my head and say, look, listen, BDA, you got to answer here. Do you think most of these guys, today's guys, are on something? The top 10 guys, whatever? Of course. If you were right to ask me, do you think Usyk, put it to you this way, if Usyk tests positive tomorrow, or if any of these guys test positive tomorrow, some of these top 10 pound for pound, some of the top 10 guys per division, are they all on something? I'm going to say yes. I'm pretty sure that most of them have to be. That's just the way it must be for the past at least 35 years. That's just the way I look.
Real quick. Oh, man. Hold on. Give me just a second. All right. Oliver McCall knocks Lewis out in September. So September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. So, but in 8 months, Lewis puts on about 10 pounds of muscle, moves better, hasn't lost any hand speed, and seems to be a better athlete than he was when he was fighting in his 230s, and he was 30 plus years old. So that's natural. I'm just wondering because, he was 235 and sculpted, but his back gets thicker, his chest gets more full, his biceps get bigger, and he's a better fighter. And he doesn't have a stamina problem. So he's put on weight, he's put on age, and he's been a better fighter by adding muscle. Where does that happen naturally?
I mean, listen, all I'll say is this, man.
I know that Holyfield looks like we know Lee Haney, and he had bald spots, and he started shaving his head to hide it. His forehead started to get 10 times too big. I get it all. I get it.
Uh-huh.
I get it. You're talking about a pro Holyfield guy. I do understand. But if you're going to say all this, how are you not going to say the same thing about Mike Tyson, who gets out of jail with biceps bigger than my head, and is still as good of an athlete as he was when he first went to jail, at least in his first couple fights. How do you explain the fact that Lennox Lewis puts on over 10 pounds of muscle and doesn't lose and actually gets better? And he's past the freak age of like 25 to 27. He's 30 to 30 plus years old and getting better as an athlete while putting on 10 pounds of muscle. But you think that's natural. But Holyfield's the one that juiced. Okay, got it. I'm not saying he didn't, but I'm trying to look at all of them.
That's my point too. That's my point too. And by the way, are we talking about Evander Holyfield or Evan Fields? Because because I think Holyfield would say that those are two different people. Shout out
to one of them's the son and one of them's Evander Holyfield. Now, whether he's using his son's name or not, I don't know. But the one that went to the University of Georgia as a football player, I believe, went by the name Evan for short.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's the story that's probably the story he would go with. Real quick, shout out to Rapax Trucking Company. Shout out to Rapax 10-4 for donating via the Buy Me a Coffee app. And he donated a juicy bill there. Shout out to Rapax, he said, for the mechanism. Well, we already got to the shout out to everybody out there. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, shout out to everybody out there who got us to buy the Roadcaster Pro. Going to be setting up that one up real soon, as soon as tomorrow, maybe even today after this show. But shout out to Rapax Trucking. Well, shout out to Rapax Trucking Company. Nevertheless, Rapax Trucking Company, really appreciate it. Actually, I should say Rapax Trucking Company LLC. Make it official. But shout out to him for his contribution with the Buy Me a Coffee app. Really appreciate it. And shout out to all of you out there as well. What was that, Chief?
I asked what that was. You said we got the piece of equipment. That's what.
It's a hardware for the audio, and it allows us to seamlessly transition between different types of audio here, different audio channels while we're broadcasting. You guys are probably going to be able to hear us clearer as I talk, and the callers as well. Once somebody calls in, there's not going to be as much distortion between you and the callers, so should make it more entertaining, get a little bit more banter between the panelists and the callers, and it's more professional too. If I want to change this sound, because anyway, it's a long story, man, but it's definitely worth it. And shout out to everybody out there who helped us get to that mark and that aim. Really appreciate it. And again, shout out to Rapax Trucking Company for that contribution. Chief, I wanted to mention something here. This is a pet peeve of mine, but it seems like today's commercials are very high on production value, but there's a little something lacking when it comes to telling a story. Again, people who work in marketing, who are copywriters, whatever, they know that you got to say as much as possible by saying as little as possible. In other words, you get a short amount of time buying ad time out there, and you got to really paint a picture in less than a minute and a half or whatever. So as we're talking here about heavyweights, I want to play you the audio, because I don't know if I can play you the video, but I'll play you the audio of the Ray Mercer versus Larry Holmes pay-per-view commercial. I think it was pay-per-view. I forget. And
it was.
Okay, thank you. And this comes to us from Coach Stroud's Classic Fights on YouTube. He's got a fantastic selection of fights on YouTube, so go check him out. And he also has a bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff, desk segments, like I said, commercials. So this comes to us from him. Check out how they paint the picture and set up. This is less than a minute, the commercial. But look at how they set up and how they make it sound epic. The Larry Holmes versus Ray Mercer fight. Again, Larry Holmes, past his peak, former champion, against a young, hot, streaking contender in Ray Mercer, gold medalist, heavy-handed. Not a lot of people are giving Holmes a chance. But check out how they hype this commercial up.
For TVKO's February Fight of the Month, live on pay-per-view cable TV. Merciless Ray Mercer versus Larry Holmes.
Ray Mercer is one of boxing's fastest rising superstars. With a record of 18-0, 13 by knockout, he's a fighter.
You can hear it?
It went in and out.
Okay, well, if you can listen to it on YouTube, because this is why we need this is why I'm going to be installing the Roadcaster either today or tomorrow, because this type of stuff would not be happening if I had the Roadcaster, which has its own. It acts as like a sound card. But anyway, if you can listen to it on YouTube, that'd be great. Even though there's going to be a delay, but let me play this again.
Champion Larry Holmes is coming out. He's been taking on a lot of fighters as he gets ready for this, but this fight coming up on February 7th is his toughest yet. He's taking on merciless Ray Mercer.
Get ready for TVKO's February Fight of the Month, live on pay-per-view cable TV. Merciless Ray Mercer versus Larry Holmes. Ray Mercer is one of boxing's fastest rising superstars. With a record of 18-0, 13 by knockout, he's a fighter to be reckoned with. After his savage knockout of Tommy Morrison, Mercer's in line for a shot at the title. But now he faces a legend. Larry Holmes comes into this fight with a lifetime record of 53-3 with 37 KOs and is one of boxing's legendary heavyweights. With a career spanning 3 decades, he's fought and defeated some of the greats in the game. The former world champion is out to prove his comeback's no fluke as he faces his toughest challenge. A vicious hitter's coming on strong. A legend's coming back. The last stand. Power versus pride. Merciless Ray Mercer versus...
All right, so then they tell you when the fight's taking place, how you can buy it, blah, blah, blah. But see, in less than a minute, they're telling you a whole story. They're telling you... They told you what Ray Mercer just did. Who is Ray Mercer? His record. Then I couldn't show it on screen, but they're showing clips of him knocking the crap out of Tommy Morrison. Then with Larry Holmes, well, how do you make this competitive? How do you sell this to people? Well, they're telling you he's the old dog, right? He's the old lion. He still has some bite to him. They tell you his record, which is still quite impressive, by like 57 wins or something like that. And then this is the best part. They can't say power versus experience, because then when people think of experience, they might say, well, that means old. Power versus pride. I mean, this is just a fantastic commercial condensed into 1 minute, and wouldn't you know it, it did turn out to be a good fight because Larry Holmes ended up pulling off the upset. His own version, his mini version of the Rumble in the Jungle. Chief,
yep.
Today's commercials obviously have more production value. They look more cinematic. They don't actually tell you what's going on. They don't actually tell you why you should buy it. It's almost as if they think, well, people are going to see how highbrow this commercial is or high-tech it is and the quality of it, and they're going to buy it. Like, I don't know many, the way they said it in this commercial, they go, Ray Mercer's looking for his shot at the title. See, at the title. They didn't say one of the titles, whatever. They made it sound like there's still just one championship out there that matters. And so people think, oh, okay, this guy must be high class or high quality because he's in line for his shot at the title. Nowadays, they would probably mention the title, the WBO, IBU, NABF. It's like, oh, nobody gives a shit about that. We want to know who the best is and why does it make this, what makes him the best. So that's just a little something there that I was YouTube surfing the other day, Chief, and I found that commercial and I said, man, obviously the production value pales in comparison back in those days, but certainly not the copywriting, the way they presented the story. So that was just something I wanted to show there. Going
You're
back
right,
to the... Yes.
Oh, I was just saying, I used to love those commercials. I used to look forward to them and record them so I could sit there and watch it again. Like, yeah, I really want to see this fight. Let me see that clip again.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So no, I enjoyed them. But at the same time, there was usually only one champ back then, recognizable, even if they weren't all quote unquote undisputed, having all the belts. You knew who the best middleweight was. Roughly around that time, it may have been James Toney by that time, but before it was Michael Nunn. But all the belts were scattered, but everyone still knew it was Nunn. And it's because these guys fought on regular TV, which regular TV is going away anyway. So that's one of the fluxes of what's going on in this sport. I've said many times before that when it comes time for someone being transcending and being bigger than anything else, all these ways we used to watch things from free TV to premium TV to pay-per-view. I'm not saying pay-per-view is gone anywhere. Obviously it hasn't, but the way we as fans followed to help build something that someone was putting together. There were so many avenues to do it from. Like people would watch Michael Nunn on between USA Tuesday Night Fights and Saturday on ABC, and they watched him come up through the rankings. Like, hey, this guy's good. And boxing was a mainstream sport back then. It may not have been prime time a lot, except for a big pay-per-view or on a premium network, but when football, college football was in the season, you better believe that there were fights on NBC, ABC, CBS, all over the place, on all three. And sometimes, back then, most people only had one TV, but if you're lucky enough to have two, you hopefully were lucky enough to have two VCRs to record 2 out of the 3 fights.
Exactly. And you know what? This is what I was talking about with Jimmy about 2 years ago when we were reading Thomas Hauser's 2-part article about the rise and fall of HBO. Boxing didn't go away because people got tired of it. People forgot about boxing because it went away into premium cable. And not everybody had access to it anymore. Like, it wasn't on CBS anymore. It wasn't on NBC, network TV. So people said, well, what's free? Oh, well, NFL, baseball, hockey. And I'm not saying that those sports weren't popular before, but I'm saying it took a while for boxing to disappear from people's memory. And it was about 40 years or thereabouts, or the 1970s, if you want to go with when cable first started. But in regards to the commercials, why I like the commercials and even more the cable previews is because they would show snippets of fights that sometimes I didn't have. So sometimes they would show snippets of a certain fight and I go, whoa, I don't have that fight on VHS. And those 3 clips, that was all I had about a certain fight that I'd read about. I couldn't go on the internet and just go on a torrent site or a file sharing site or on YouTube and find the fight. If they didn't replay it on TV, tough luck. Unless you knew somebody that you could trade tapes with. I think... who was it? Was it Ring Magazine? I think at some point they were advertising tape selling. What do they call it? Vendors who would actually sell you.
Yes, they were.
But then again, that was tricky.
Remember.
That was tricky because, they didn't really hold the rights to that. So they couldn't just give you any old fight. But it was difficult. I don't necessarily miss those days, let me tell you, where you couldn't find a fight. Sean Rain in the chat brings up a good point. He says, Larry Holmes had the most underrated jab ever. Well, I think a lot of people give him credit for his jab, by the way, but he's saying that he had an underrated jab, and he says he revolutionized the jab. Tommy Morrison had a nasty left hook, low key. Well, I was going to tell you about that, Chief, because the other day I was watching Lloyd Hunningham versus, I think it was Michael Strasford. How did you pronounce his name? Stratford or Strasford? Anyway, I was watching that fight. And Hunnigan had a it was a stiff jab that he was throwing. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Who has a good hard jab nowadays? The last great jabber that I remember from the last 15 years, Gennady Golovkin. Other than that, I'm really, and I know you haven't been paying attention to boxing right now as much in the last couple of months, but I'm really trying to scratch my head here going, who has a shotgun jab a la Ike Corte or Larry Holmes? I can't really remember.
Well, Corte's jab was excellent. The problem was he relied so much on it that he didn't do a lot off of it other than the right hand. Because I don't remember which fight it was, but I do remember, obviously De La Hoya, and he did a little bit against Jose Luis Lopez. He'd throw the hook. Had a really good hook, and he could hook off the jab, but he barely did that. He just would throw the jab until he softened you up enough to start dropping the right hand in. And he was just so controlled and too predictable, which is why some people will say, oh, he would have beaten Mayweather. I'm like, no, he wouldn't. Mayweather would have outsmarted him because he didn't use all his repertoire. Now, if he showed in against Mayweather and used all his tools all at one time, different story, but that's not who he was as a fighter. And you mentioned, we also talked about Holmes. Holmes's jab was different. And the great Gail Clancy said that George Foreman had an amazing jab, one of the best in heavyweight history. He said it reminded him of Sonny Liston's. And then I think Jim Lampley said better than Larry Holmes. It's a different type of jab. Holmes was very snapping. It was still a weapon, just like Sonny Liston's was. Grim Reaper said Sonny Liston, but that was ages ago, and he's correct. One of them was more like being hit by a freight train and a telephone pole, and the other one's like being hit with a jolt of lightning. Is the best way I can compare it. Both of them are going to throw your timing off. Both of them are going to do a lot of damage. They're going to bruise your face and everything, but one's going to really wear down your neck and your entire upper body. That's going to be the Sonny Liston / George Foreman, and the other one's going to shock you to the point to where, you after a while, it's coming, so you're closing your eyes before you get hit with it, to where you're hit by it, you're stunned by it, and now you don't see the right hand coming behind it.
Exactly.
A lot of times, when he threw that jab, when he double or tripled up with it, by the time he go throw the right hand, he knocked you out of range. Whereas Holmes didn't do that. When it was the lightning bolt shocked you at that very last level, it was just enough to where you're not going to have enough time to react to the right hand coming right behind it, and that's the shot that's going to hurt you because you don't see it.
Exactly, and that's what I keep saying here. I mean, I'm scratching my head here trying to figure out who has that type of scary jab, the type of jab where it feels like it's a right hand, the type of jab where if, as a viewer you look at it and you go, you know what, I don't think I want to get hit by that. I wouldn't want to take too many of those. So maybe I'm not focusing enough here, but we need some jabbers and good body punchers while we're at it. Chief, let's go back to the archives. And by the way, shout out to everybody out there. Shout out to everybody who's listening. Hit the like, hit the like, hit the like. JumpTube says he's back. Tyson McNeely, August 19th, only on TVKO. Can't believe that was on pay-per-view, by the way. That speaks volumes about Tyson's drawing power and the anticipation of his comeback. And also rereading some of these Ring Magazine articles, which again, free on Ring TV. You just got to sign up with an email address. They're talking about how, I think this is about 96, prior to the first Holyfield fight. People are complaining about it. I mean, is he ever going to fight somebody good anymore? I mean, he's fighting a bunch of stiffs. So, yeah, that only lasted so long, that whole comeback tour. But yeah, shout out to everybody in the chat right now. Hand History Vault, Chitlin Distributor, King KO the Great, More BDC, Timmy, Barry Nivola, and all those guys. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the show. Chitlin Distributor says, BDA doesn't read the chat. We got all the answers here. I'm not denying that you guys got all the answers, but I can't do both things at the same time. That's why I pause every 10 minutes and I start reading the chat. Phil Miles says, Parker, I think he's talking about Joseph Parker, is overrated. Well, Chief, I always say this too. Like when we talk about somebody being underrated, by whom? Because there's different factions. There's the fans, there's the media.
Right. Like
who's overrating whom is what I'm saying. That's a good question to ask. If it's both,
I agree.
If it's both factions, then yeah, you got yourself a certified overrated / underrated guy. But if it's just a couple of people, I don't know. But I wanted to go back to the archives here, Ring Magazine. So like I told you, I was perusing some of the articles here, and I found, I think it is the right one. This is the March 1997 edition of Ring Magazine. So
I had that one.
Oh, really? Okay, so you might be able to find out this email here from one of the, I mean, not email, I keep saying email, this correspondence from one of the readers. And I want to get your thoughts on this. Just goes to show you that things never change here as it pertains to fantasy matchups and pound-for-pound discussions. This is what Tony Hung, which used to be my nickname, by the way, Tony Hung from Thousand Oaks, California says, he says, for the last several months, I've been hearing that Roy Jones should pass Pernell Whitaker and move to the top of the pound-for-pound ratings. Though Jones is a special talent, ranking him first at the expense of Whitaker is ludicrous. Jones has captured a pair of titles in his young career, while Whitaker won 3 titles at lightweight alone. Whitaker has fought a better quality of opposition, and his accomplishments tower over those of Jones. Not only is Sweet Pea one of the 4 men to have captured the lightweight and welterweight crowns, joining Barney Ross, Henry Armstrong, and Roberto Duran, but he has joined Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Tommy Hearns as the only fighters to have won world titles at 4 different weights. Pretty elite company, don't you think? So that was Tony Hung talking about that. And just to refresh people's memory here, because I had to go look it up just in case I wasn't mistaken, this is this issue came out in early 96, okay, Chief and readers? So these are the last 3 guys that each fighter fought in 1995. So in 1995, Whitaker fought 3 times. He decisioned Julio Cesar Vasquez for the super welterweight title, a portion of it. Gary Jacobs decisioned him when he went back down to welterweight. And then again, another welterweight defense against Jake Rodriguez, whom he managed to stop in under 6 rounds. So he fought 3 times. He went 3-0 with 1 stoppage. Roy Jones, for his part, stopped all 3 of his opponents, and they included Antoine Bird, Vinny Pazienza, and Tony Thornton. Now, unless you're a hardcore boxing fan or you lived through that era, I think the only really, competent guy that you remember is Vinny Paz, that most people would remember. And that's probably because a movie came out about him a couple of years ago. So, Chief, what do you think about what Tony Hung said? By the beginning of 1996, should Roy Jones have usurped Pernell Whitaker in the pound-for-pound rankings?
So we're going off memory. Let's see here. So, but the thing about Roy's performances at that time were extremely dynamic. They were memorable. They were exciting. They were electric. I'm not a huge Roy Jones fan. I'm not a huge Pernell Whitaker fan, so I can objectively say that at this point in time, I mean, leading up to this. So we're not just talking about that because this guy was talking about Purnell's entire career.
Tony Hung.
Right, Mr. Hung. Well, I mean, I was trying to be, respectful. So the fight between Roy and Bernard at that point in time, which was in '93, was the greatest middleweight fight that ever happened between two and upcoming prospects. Wrote absolutely nobody in the history of boxing after that. That fight was, people try to talk about what great classic showcase it was of anything. Nobody in 1993 thought that. So everybody that says it now, I don't know what they're getting it from. Nobody thought that at all.
It actually, can I just add something? It actually was a bad look on Roy Jones. Actually, people criticizing for not being able to take Hopkins out.
Oh, yeah. People were highly unimpressed with him in that fight, and he was the favorite. Because he had all these knockouts, and it looked like, there were some people on the lower level internet level that would chat. It wasn't written in any magazines. I remember going, was he fighting just a bunch of like hands, bums, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's like, where's this power? He's so ripped. Why did this fight look so bad? I mean, I don't care what anybody, these young guys now, Roy Jones is this. To date, in 1993, after that fight, no one was saying he's going to be the greatest ever from that performance. And some people are thinking he might have been overrated. Now, moving on, his knockout of Throm Malinga, though, was extremely impressive. And then his knockout of Thomas Tate was also highly impressive because Thomas Tate was coming off of a 12-round close decision against the hard-punching Julian Jackson. The fight with... my screen
Antoine
switch?
Bird.
I was looking... Yeah, there's Roy Jones. So the James Toney fight was impressive to some, but it was... He clearly outclassed James Toney. We're going to put where it was. So then we get to the point where you're saying Antoine Bird, Vinny Pazins, and Tony Thornton. Again, very electric performances. As a contrast, Whitaker was not. The fight with Vasquez is impressive because he's taking a bigger guy, but Jake Rodriguez was close to being a shot fighter, and there's nothing special about, wasn't it, Gary Jacobs, right? There's nothing special about that guy.
Right.
He's a full-fledged welterweight, whereas Purnell was a quote-unquote moving up welter, but neither one of them were on anyone's highly ranked list of anything. Most people didn't even know who those guys were. So the electric, what was going on around that time was, hey, this Roy Jones is, after those two fights with Hopkins and Toney, people are starting to say, okay, maybe we were judging a little too harshly. He's really got some stuff going here. He can really do stuff. And they were noticing this speed and athleticism, this power, how he's blitzing people out, and like, who can really challenge this guy? No one cares who can challenge Whitaker anymore by this time. Whitaker's on the top because of his fight with Chavez like 3 years prior to that. That's where we were in his career. Everyone knew he was on the downslide. Everyone knew he wasn't doing that great against lesser opponents because they weren't entertaining. He wasn't doing anything spectacular. His defense wasn't even what it used to be, of being all slippery and everything. They were just extremely limited, entertaining fights against guys he wasn't even up for fighting. They were, I don't know why those were the ones that were chosen, but that's who he was fighting. Roy was starting to get some electricity by this time. Was it enough to replace him? No, but the interest was enough for people to start saying Roy Jones pound for pound. And it was starting to really take traction at that time. But let's not forget that also during that time, they considered that this writer was talking about him and Pernell Whitaker. Everyone was overlooking what Felix Trinidad and Oscar De La Hoya were doing at that time.
Wait a minute. You had to bring up Trinidad, and we're going to get to Trinidad, by the way. I got a couple of things about him, some of the magazines that I unearthed. But again, that just goes to show that the pound-for-pound discussion is always the same. And the story doesn't end here, Chief. But before I get to that, shout out to, who was it? Hold on a second. It was Timmy T. Shout out to Timmy for his contribution with the Super Chat. He says, great topics, BDA. Well, shout out to you, Timmy. I'm glad you're enjoying the show, and hopefully everybody out there is enjoying it as well. Again, a lot to talk about as it pertains to boxing history, and we're not even going all the way back. We're still just about 30 years away. But the story didn't end here, Chief, because then I'm looking at the next issue of Ring Magazine, and this is from Jim Tuck, which is something that Buffalo Bill used to do, right? He used to tuck. Huh. But anyway, this is from the June 1996 edition, and I didn't put it up on the screen because I didn't look for it yet. But this is another portion of the readers' communiques, and people had something to say, quite a bit to say about what Tony Hung had said in the previous edition. So this is from the June 1996 edition, and somebody says, your last issue has me confused as to who the pound-for-pound best boxer should be and why. Reader Tony Hung wrote that based on Pernell Whitaker's past performances, he was head and shoulders above Roy Jones. Does the mythical pound-for-pound title belong to the best fighter over the last 2, 3, 5, or 10 years? Or should it be awarded to the best fighter today? Whitaker clearly has fought more quality opponents than Jones, but the last one I can remember was Julio Cesar Chavez. Since then, he has fought mediocre opposition and looked good, but not great. Meanwhile, Jones has fought everyone. What's he saying? Every alphabet soup politician has allowed him to, and he has looked great. So which is it, he says? If the pound-for-pound ratings are based on past performance, Pernell Whitaker is still the man, and Tszyu doesn't belong on the list. However, if the ratings are to reflect the best today, Jones, Oscar De La Hoya, and Felix Trinidad should be at the top. Let Whitaker fight Felix Trinidad. If he wins convincingly, he gets my vote. If not, it's time to Ring and many others quit reminiscing and get with the program. That was from Jim Tuck. And Chief, it seems like he was, or it seems like you were echoing some of his statements.
There was a point in time in the 90s when people were starting to ask what was the criteria for pound, because it was really becoming a hot topic, because I don't remember the term being, I know it's from a long time ago, way before I was born. I get that. Mm-hmm. But as a kid, I didn't remember it until Chavez took Tyson's place, because I think Tyson was number one for a little bit until he lost to Douglas in some rankings, and Chavez took over. And so I really didn't know about it, but after Chavez had his thing with Whitaker, it really started to explode, because there was Terry Norris, and there was Felix Trinidad, and there was Michael Nunn, and there was Roy Jones, and these guys were all trying to really grasp that title, and everybody was fighting for it. So people were starting to wonder, well, why is Pernell still on top? He had, like that guy said, has he done anything in a while? He's fought people that were barely names. His names at welterweight were modest at best. I mean, Buddy McGirt, again, fought De La Hoya by this time. So if Buddy McGirt and Usyk and Chavez were the biggest names he fought at that weight class, everybody else were just people that nobody heard of before. Whereas, again, James Toney and Roy Jones and Trinidad, De La Hoya in 1995 had 4 or 5 fights all by knockout against John Molina, Rafael Willis, Genaro Hernandez, and Jesse James Lehouse. So 4 fights, all by knockout. That was a who's who of the junior lightweight to lightweight division. That was more than Whitaker had done in 3 years. So there was a big talk of, like, how do we rank and what's it based off of? Because some people were wanting it to be of what have you done for me lately? And a lot of those people were rallying behind Roy Jones, but there were ones like myself that were rallying behind De La Hoya and Trinidad, saying, hey, don't forget about what these guys are doing also. And so there was a big discussion of a lot of guys of who's really going to take it, and why is Whitaker still there? He's not doing anything. Mm-hmm. So I do remember those discussions in the magazines and in some of the talks, and the internet was still on dial-up back then, but I do remember being in some of the chat rooms of ESPN and CBS Sportsline, and people were talking about these things on what the criteria was, because they were waiting for either Whitaker to do something meaningful or for someone else to take his place that deserves it.
Well, I'm kind of perplexed by Jim Tuck's correspondence there for that issue of Ring Magazine, because he's saying his argument seems to be, well, who's the best right now? Okay, but how many fights are you judging that off of? Because it kind of reminds me of the argument that was taking place 3 years ago or thereabouts, when Tank Davis did about 900,000 pay-per-view buys against Ryan Garcia, or I think it was 800,000, but they beefed it up to 1.2 with their whole shtick of, well, sources say, so they never actually had to divulge the real numbers. But there were some people on Twitter were saying he is now the pound-for-pound box office pay-per-view king. And people were saying, well, what about Canelo? And then they said, no, it's Tank Davis, because his last pay-per-view did this. when people were saying, yeah, but what about look at the history before and what's going to come next? Do you think Tank Davis is going to keep making or generating 1.2 million pay-per-view buys? And that was their argument. Like at this moment, in present time, at this very second, he is the pay-per-view king. And then what happened with Tank Davis? His subsequent pay-per-view buys never broke 200,000. I think at the most he did 200,000. So that argument really makes no sense, quite nonsensical.
Well, they did break 5. We know that. He broke 5 one time, and that was because of his opponent, not because of him.
Right.
So,
but what I'm saying here as it pertains to the pay-per-view discussion is Jim Tuck's, again, that argument of, well, who's the best right now? And look, I agree, Pernell Whitaker, if you go by the official decision, he didn't get the win over Chavez. It was ruled a draw. But I mean, if you're talking about the skills and the accomplishments, he had quite a dossier behind him. And I don't know if what Roy Jones had done at the time was enough to usurp him. But again, those are the discussions that we constantly have. Another one that we continue to have, Chief, is when people build their pound-for-pound list, they go, well, I have this guy number 1. And you go, but who has he beaten? And they go, well, it's not about who he's beaten, it's about the eye test. And I go, well, wait a minute. I mean, you can take Moses Aitauma right now, a heavyweight prospect, and say, well, based off the eye test, I think he beats everybody, so I'm going to put him number 1 pound-for-pound. To me, that's not how it works. And I think a lot of people's lists don't work that way. But just one last thing about that, because it doesn't end here. In this same issue, somebody else replied to Tony Hung. As you can tell, Tony Hung was very popular back in the day. So this guy goes, this is Paul Azadi from Baltimore, Maryland. He says, reader Tony Hung feels Pernell Whitaker should get the nod over Roy Jones in the pound-for-pound ratings. This notion doesn't hang well with me. Even though Whitaker has been atop 4 different divisions, no one has recently bedazzled the boxing world quite like Jones. He's not only thoroughly outclassed all of his opponents, he's destroyed them. The old-timers have begun comparing him to Sugar Ray Robinson. Sweet Pea is also a great fighter. But with Jones's reflexes, speed, style, and power, he deserves the nod as boxing's best. So again, this dude is making the same argument that I was telling you about. That. Well, it's not about necessarily the accomplishments, it's also about the eye test. What do you think about that?
Well, someone in the chat had pointed this out, and this has to be considered for the topic back then. Mm-hmm. When Terry Norris lost to Simon Brown, he lost his status as number 3 fighter, pound for pound in the world. James Toney took that spot. And that's where he was solidly. May have even been as high as number 2 by the time Chavez and Whitaker happened. Because if we remember, not long after the Chavez-Whitaker fight, Chavez lost to Frankie Randall later the following year. So James Toney was right there between 2 or 3 when Roy Jones one-sidedly beat him. Now, whether you found it entertaining or not remains to be seen. Jones had every answer. Toney didn't show up in the best shape. He didn't take the fight right. But Jones befuddled, frustrated, confused, and if James Toney had any quit in him, it would have shown up that night.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he didn't have quit in him because he tried the entire night. He kept throwing double jab and trying to load up with the right hand, didn't set up any traps, and it showed the fact that one fighter, at least at that night, had a better IQ than the other. Career-wise, I don't know who had better IQ, but that particular night, Roy Jones had it. And he even said it later. I've never looked at him as someone that overly analyzed things well. A lot of times when he talks about fights and who does this and does what, he always tries to say something to make it sound like he's got this great IQ and he sees things other people don't see. And sometimes I'm sitting there going, I don't know what you're talking about because it doesn't make any sense. But what he did say about James Toney was he said, I noticed that James Toney could get hit with the left hook really easily. He said, so instead of using my jab, because a lot of times when you'd use your jab, if you didn't bring it back all the way, and Jones admitted he didn't bring it all the way back to his chin, he liked to leave it low. He said that a lot of times Toney would lean back with the jab, anticipating the right hand, and then he'd throw his own counter right hand, whether it be a straight or an overhand, right back, and that's how he'd knock some people out. Mm-hmm. So Toney said he saw that coming. So what he did instead was, instead of throwing the jab, he just turned it sideways and turned it into a hook. So instead of throwing like jab, 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 he was turning his hook. He was with the shoulder. He was throwing the jab, but with his forearm, he was kind of like turning it over into a hook, and he was flurrying with the hook with really short shoe shine hooks, and it was throwing Toney's timing off all night. Okay, well, he outthought Toney that night. He saw a weakness that Toney had. He exploited it for 12 straight rounds, and Toney could not adapt around it. So he again, King KO says Jones totally outboxed 150%. Whatever IQ he had over his athleticism, he used both that night. And James Toney was somewhere between 2 or 3 best pound for pound fighter in the world. And Jones pulled that off. Jones was not favored that night. He may not have been a heavy underdog, but he was not favored. So he went in against a more experienced guy to his weight class, moving up in weight, thoroughly outboxed a guy who turned out to be an all-time great and who was top fighter in the world at the time. And Purnell was fighting your Jake Rodriguez's and your Gary Jacobs. So, yeah, that's the reason why some people had a point that Jones possibly should have been number 1, because all the lesser fighters were demolished. All the upper fighters were getting completely outclassed.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is something to be said about what have you done lately. I mean, I do think that is a fair point to bring up when you're comparing pound for pound lists, or or when you're debating pound for pound spots. Chief, I gotta go hit the latrines real quick because I've been sipping on water here. But could you? I'm sharing the screen. Can you read the chats, the chat comments?
Well, I may be a bit behind you, but I got my TV on so I can see some of these. And I'll address them for
if you need to check the chat to buy some time, please do so. But I'll be right back. Take over for me, please.
Well, someone I James but they've been James Toney's at super middleweight. James is not in, would be able to do with his height reach, his ferocity. He would do a number of them. But you got to remember, James Toney likes ferocious fighters like that, and he knows how to sit back, let you overextend, let you do something that's going to show a weakness in an opening, and he's going to exploit it at super middleweight with 5, 6, 7 punches, and they're going to be power punches. So I do think that it would be more difficult for Benavidez than some people think, despite how big he is. Not to mention Toney had a tendency to put on a lot of weight overnight also at 168. So, but respect to Mayweather Sr., he showed De La Hoya how to master the jab. No. De La Hoya's jab was amazing before Sr. had anything to do with him. What he tried to teach De La Hoya to do was the shoulder roll and roll with shots coming at him to throw a counter right hand. And it worked against Vargas, but nobody else. Iran Barkley was not a bum. You're 100% correct. However, Iran Barkley has 0 title defenses over any championship he won. He won 3 belts and defended none of them successfully. Just to point that out for people that think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying he doesn't, but I've never seen a person that won 3 titles and never defended a single one of them be in the Hall of Fame. For Greece, Canelo would have an easy time with James Toney, right? If James Toney doesn't show up in shape, then I don't say it's easy, but Canelo's got a shot at 168, especially the one eating the tainted meat. But they both were at 168. Toney wasn't taking the special vitamins yet. That happened after he moved up in weight. He tested positive twice later in his career. Let's see here. Iran Barkley was washed by the time he fought Toney. Yes, that was the title he won off of Daryl Van Horn. And he'd already beaten Hearns in a rematch and then dropped back down. I remember there was a night of champions when they had Roy Jones, James Toney, and Iran Barkley all in there, and Barkley looked the worst out of all of them. And James Toney fought Doug DeWitt, and one of the best performances I've ever seen Toney do on his counterpunching was both against Iran Barkley and against Prince Charles Williams, but the Barkley one was just so much better. The way he could just he sat against the ropes, and it was a rope-a-dope with a high IQ at the same time. Everything was blocked, everything was rolled with, everything was dodged, and everything was countered with extremely precision, high velocity and power shots. Just they were amazing. If you want to see a good replay and study of really good infighting on counter punches while not getting hit, it's not Floyd Mayweather. Watch James Toney against Iran Barkley and Prince Charles Williams. He totally decimated those 2 guys.
Yeah,
Julian Jackson, the Eagle
real
for
killer.
the 80s smokes. every modern era middleweight. Julian Jackson was not a great middleweight. He moved up to middleweight and he carried his punch up there, but he didn't fight a lot of really good, talented fighters at middleweight until he fought Jordan McClellan. We saw what happened. He was a better junior middleweight, and I think he could rule the junior middleweight division if he fought today.
And you know
I agree
what?
with part of that.
I don't really like Julian Jackson. I mean, it's hard. It's difficult to dislike a puncher, but Errol Graham was this close to getting himself a strap. And Julian Jackson knocked his ass out. He was beating the crap out of Jackson, surprisingly.
Yeah.
But I mean, this Errol
Was that
Graham
middleweight
guy.
or was it junior? I forget.
What happened? What?
So which weight class was that? Middleweight or junior middleweight?
I think it was. I want to say middleweight, because I think it was after Errol Graham versus Mike McCollum. I think. I'm not sure of the timeline.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, I believe Errol Graham was a career middleweight anyway, wasn't he?
You know what? I don't even remember when he fell. Let me. When in doubt, check Wikipedia. Let me check. By the way, don't forget to hit the like. Really helps us out. And
it was middleweight because Julian Jackson's next fight was against Dennis Milton, and that was on the undercard to Chavez and I think Smith. I don't remember. I remember his first name. The guy that ran around for 12 rounds and Chavez was upset afterwards, saying that all he did want to do was run and collect a payday.
Well, you know what? That Sumbu Kalambe guy is actually pretty underrated if you think about it. Not exactly the most crowd-pleasing style, and also it's pretty confusing. His whole genealogy, or he was from the Congo, but he fought in Italy, and they called him Italian, I believe. So it was almost like, well, what's this? What is he really? But if you think about it, hey, 2 wins. I mean, a win over Mike McCollum and a win over Errol Graham. That just off the bat, right there, you go, whoa. I am curious why most people don't talk about him. And I have to assume it's because of his fighting style. He was a stick and move guy.
No, it's 2 words. Michael Nunn. That was the unification fight that was supposed to be a unification fight. They might have stripped one of them.
Yes.
From their belt, but it was supposed to be a really challenging fight for Michael Nunn, and not even 3 minutes later, one giant left hand knocked him out cold. And I think that was the worst thing that happened to Michael Nunn, because I think Michael Nunn started to think he was a better fighter than he really was. Not to say that he was not a talented guy, but I think he let it go to his head that he didn't have to train as hard because of how hard other talented fighters were with Kalambe, and how he just knocked him out with one shot. I think that went to his head.
And by the way, I'm looking at Kalambe's record. I didn't even know he beat Steve Collins too. Is he in the Hall of Fame, Kalambe? He's got to be, right?
No, I'm pretty sure he's not.
So in today's Boxing Hall of Fame, that dude hasn't made it in there. With wins over Mike McCollum, Errol Graham, I see he's also beat Aaron Barkley, Steve Collins. He's not in the Hall of Fame.
BDA, Wilfredo Vasquez fought at 1 titles in 3 weight classes, has 9 defenses all on the road at 122, and has a win over Orlando Canizales, who's in the Hall of Fame, and he's barely making the roster. So,
well, you voiced your displeasure at the fact that Wilfredo Vasquez is not in the Hall of Fame before, and you have every right to do so again, because these Hall of Fame standards you can go crazy trying to figure out what the hell they're talking about. Or how they feel.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of good fighters out there that probably deserve it, and they can only vote in so many a year. But why is he consistently getting pushed to the back? Kalambe was a very good fighter for a time. How many Hall of Famers does he have on his record? By McCallum. Okay. What else has he got with it? If he would have beaten Michael Nunn, the people would be crying, saying he should be in, and they would be right. But that knockout loss is just it hurt him. It hurt his standing for some people. And I'm not saying he doesn't belong in. I'm not gonna make that argue against him. That was nowhere near what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say is, when it comes time to you start thinking about the best middleweight of that time, and because he got knocked out by Michael Nunn with 1 punch, Michael Nunn was the best of that time. Second place guy usually doesn't get in.
That's a good point. It's a shame, but it's again, you can rip your hair out trying to figure out what the hell these people are doing. Sean Rain in the chat says Salvador Sanchez is a timeless fighter. He smokes anyone in any timeline. The Babe Ruth of boxing. No cap. Well, incidentally, like I said, like I keep saying here, Ring Magazine archives are available for free. You just got to sign up on the official website, provide an email address, and you're in. And I was looking through some of the issues that I'd always wanted to get my hands on, including one. It was from 1990. Hold on, let me see. I got it written here. It's the top lightweights, blah, blah, blah. Hold on. All right, but there's an edition. I'm going to find it here soon, but it's about the top 20 featherweights of all time. There we go. It's a January 2002 edition. It's got De La Hoya on the cover. And it's got the 20 greatest featherweights of all time. And if my memory serves me, I think they listed Salvador Sanchez number 7. I think 6 or 7. Might have been behind Eusebio Pedrosa, maybe behind or after him. But he was around that same spot. And that's saying something because, as they say in the article, the featherweight division was one of the most prestigious divisions ever, just locked with talent, chock full of talent for about 100 years. So if you could make it into the top 10 of that division, that means you were pretty good. And that's considering that Salvador Sanchez didn't even get to fulfill his potential, if he would have been able to, because you never know. The fact that he died before he even hit his mid-20s is quite telling. Also, I found another edition of Ring Magazine that I wanted to get to. This is a June 1996 edition, and it's the top 50 fighters of the last 50 years.
Oh, so I remember that one. I still have it.
Oh, you do? Okay, well, I think maybe you can refresh my memory because I don't have access to it right now. But I think they had Sanchez number 40-something. So that's pretty high praise again right there.
Well, especially for a featherweight. You got to remember, they're talking about guys going all the way back to black and white and radio days too. So to put him in there and something like that, it was that's pretty substantial. You also have to consider the fact, he died at 23 and there's a lot of stuff left to go, but you have to rank him not with what could be, but what he actually did. And you've got guys that were like Barney Ross and Willie Pep and legends that were extremely talented fighters against the guy that didn't get to finish his career. There's only so much you can do to try and justify him being ranked up there with them. You know what I mean? As talented as he was when he was at his best at 22, 23, there's a couple things you have to consider. One, he never fought outside of featherweight. 2, he fought a very talented, and I don't have any knock against any of his competition at all. But 3, he was only 23, and some guys do peak early. So you don't know what would have happened later.
Exactly.
We do know what those guys accomplished. So we got to rank him of what he did, not what he could have done, because a lot of people could have done a lot of things, but they didn't. You know? And Timmy, I can't say that Salvador stomps anybody at 122 because he never had a title fight there.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's like when a guy starts out his career and he's got so much promise and you're looking forward to what could be. And then if that fighter unfortunately dies, you're stuck in that. It's almost like Jim Morrison, or what was his name? The guy from the Doors, or, you know, these singers,
Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix, or, you know, these guys, these singers from the 1970s that you can only wonder what if. But, well, I mean, John Lennon, that's another one, even though he was already in his 40s. But when he got assassinated in 1980, people go, "Whoa, what could have been? What could have been?" We're looking at it now. We're looking at Paul McCartney, and when we saw George Harrison and Ringo Starr and the Rolling Stones, they just kept on trudging and they got less and less popular. So people hold on to that magic of, well, what could have been? The rise would have been exponential and unstoppable. But no, like it was William Deadloff. He did the top 20 Mexican list over at World Boxing in 2006. And he said of Salvador Sanchez, he said, we never got to see him get old. We never got to see him get tired of the sport. We never got to see him if, you know, he ended up getting married and then the wife becomes a pain in the ass and he starts losing fight. You know what I mean? All those things that we've seen happen to fighters, we never got to see him. So in our eyes, he's encased in ice, right? Or some sort of glycerin. He's perfect the way he ended. But like Chief is saying, and like Willem Deadloff was saying, like we don't know what could have happened. Not that perfection seldom exists in boxing. Even guys who end up getting, even people who end up retiring undefeated, they still got blemishes. Joe Calzaghe has that. What's his name again? Reed fight. Robin Reed. Crawford has the Madrimov fight. Mayweather has the Castillo bout. I mean, it's just different judges. Those guys could have losses on the record. So nobody is perfect. No one's unbeatable. And You just got to see their
And
careers
Ricardo
play.
Lopez fought that Panamanian guy. Forget his name now, but he
Rosendo
got
Alvarez.
dropped, and then the fight got Rosendo Alvarez, and both of them were cut so bad they called the fight a draw because I think it didn't go past 4 rounds. But he wasn't exactly setting that fight on fire. Lopez wasn't, so that could have ended up being a loss down the road. That might have saved his career. I'm not saying he would have lost because when they did fight and it did go the 12 rounds, Lopez was getting cut again from clashes of heads and other stuff, and he was bleeding real bad, and he took the power off his shots and just did volume punches to dig deep and win, and he did that. So he may have been able to do it in that fight too, but he was challenged very hard, very early in a fight that he wasn't looking good. So even though he was undefeated, there was a possibility that if that fight would have gone on, we don't know what would have happened, but it wasn't looking like it was going to go in his favor. So even he has something, and we've already discussed Mayweather's close calls that would have gone in a direction.
Right.
So.
Well, you have.
Yes, Rafael Rosendo Alvarez. I do appreciate you helping us out with that. Rosendo Alvarez. That was the guy I was thinking of. Appreciate you.
What had you said? What nationality did you say? Puerto Rican, or what did you say?
Oh, you're right. He was from Nicaragua. I don't know why I said Panamanian.
Yeah, right. Well, Chief is he thinks everyone there's Mexican and there's Puerto Rican, and that's it. Everyone, a guy from Bolivia, he calls him Mexican. So don't fault Chief for his.
You know me. You know
by
me.
The way, by the way, gematria.
If they can't disappear in the snow, I don't know where they're from.
That's a good way of putting it. Gematria in the chat says Salvador Sanchez took himself out to avoid tough fights. That's 5D chess right there. They can't beat me if I'm not alive. That would have been a very smart strategy right there. Chief, I want to bring something up here because the internet is a great thing. I mean, I don't think I'd be talking to you if it wasn't for the internet because, I'm up here in Montreal. I don't think you'd want to be plowing through snow to get to me. And I don't know what I'd be doing in South Carolina. I mean, I know you're not from South Carolina, but we're going to go with it. But thanks to the magic of the internet, we get to talk. And it's the same thing. That's right. And it's the same thing with boxing. People forge connections via boxing. This is from a Johnny Tapia documentary. And Johnny Tapia was good friends with Mike Tyson. Check out how Mike Tyson... This is from 2002, I believe. So this is the crazier version of Mike Tyson. And check out how he describes his friendship with Johnny Tapia as only Mike Tyson can via his poetic style.
Tyson.
Shit, hold on a second. The sound is very low. I'm going to have to boost that. Hopefully you guys can hear it. Hopefully you can hear it, Chief. I'm pretty sure people can hear it on the YouTube, but I don't know if you're going to be able to. But check this out.
I'm going to mute my mic so I can listen to it on YouTube.
Okay.
Gloves title and made some like-minded friends. Like Mike Tyson.
I know I got along with him because he was a stick from the barrio and I was a nigga from the ghetto. And we both had the same kind of affinity. And we just bond.
That's the same way my priest described my relationship with him. But so that's Mike Tyson describing his friendship with Johnny Tapia. Two guys who got traumatized early on in life. And I guess in spite of that, or maybe because of that, they became pretty good fighters. Pretty good boxers. What's the other one I wanted to bring up here? Well, I might.
The Hector Camacho interview.
Was that
the Hector Camacho interview?
Which one?
When he called out everybody.
No.
All those.
No, I'm not gonna play that. I'm not gonna play that one. That would get us kicked off YouTube. Okay, this is what I wanted to bring up here. Do you recall a guy by the name of Andrew Maynard? Or Maynard?
Yeah. I brought him up before.
I don't remember that, but I'm pretty sure you have. I just don't remember it. But I was going because people talk about Deontay Wilder, and they talk about Deontay Wilder, which again, he deserves credit for the fact that he was only boxing for about 3 years and got himself to the Olympics. But I was looking back about Andrew Maynard because I didn't really watch him in the Olympics, but I would keep hearing about him. Now, for people that don't know Andrew, by the way, how do you pronounce his name? Because I'm pretty sure
I think you said it right.
Really? Okay, because I've heard commentators call him Maynard, something like that. I call him Maynard. Andrew Maynard, a 1988 U.S. Olympic boxer, captured gold in the Seoul Olympics. Interestingly enough, he only started boxing about 1984, 1985. So he only had about 4 years experience by the time he got, or thereabouts, when he got to the 1988 Olympics. The fact that he even got into the Olympics is impressive enough. The fact that he made it to the finals and ended up winning is very impressive. His first match, or his final match, occurred mere minutes after his teammate, Roy Jones Jr., got robbed of Olympic gold. So as he was walking out to his fight, he asked one of the coaches, hey, how did Roy do? And they said, Roy lost. So he thought, wow, if they can take the fight away from Roy, what the hell are they going to do to me? So he said, I got to go get it. And he was known for his high punch work rate in the amateurs, and it wasn't any different in the Olympics. The guy was throwing punches in bunches, just didn't want to be denied. And he took the fight to his opponent and ended up winning the medal. Then he ended up linking up with Sugar Ray Leonard back when Leonard started getting into promoting, and he blames Ray Leonard for trying to mold him into a boxer. We got him beat a bunch of times, but also like David Reed, because of his advanced age. Well, in this case, because of his advanced age, they ended up pushing him for a title shot. He wasn't ready. He ended up losing a couple of fights and never really lived up to the mantle of that gold medal. But man, I mean, this dude, Chief, when you talk about a guy who only started boxing in '94 and 4 years later he's in the Olympics winning gold, well, what did you think about Andrew Maynard?
I remember his teammate, Foster, Todd Foster. They had something in common, is that they overachieved in the amateurs, even though Todd Foster didn't win a gold medal, past what they were able to do. Guys that were more experienced than them. They outwilled themselves into being Olympians and into putting on good performances at the Olympics and to the beginning parts of their career. You asked about Maynard, so let me just close the door on Foster. Foster's problem was he was not. He needed a longer amateur career. He needed that season to try and be a better fighter. Mm-hmm. Maynard's problem was he could dish it, but he couldn't take it. Hard puncher. When things went well, he looked amazing. When someone gave some resistance, I don't think he had that inner dog, as we've said on this line many times before, to be able to compete at that higher level. Awesome puncher, decent instincts, good counter puncher. But then he gets in against Bobby Ches, who is just levels ahead of him, and he just couldn't take it.
It is interesting that he speaks volumes about a guy who had natural ability to be able to get to the top of the amateur ranks with that gold medal. But then the professional fight game, that's a whole other thing. Now, he blames Sugar Ray Leonard for trying to mold him into a boxer. Do you think that criticism is deserved of Leonard, or what do you think?
Well, Leonard was only his manager. It wasn't like he was his trainer that was in there the whole time telling him what to. Well, I don't know if he's telling him what to do in the gym or not. I wasn't there. But he was only his manager. He wasn't his chief second or his trainer. So if Leonard was in there trying to change him from, then if there's any truth to that, then Leonard was stepping past his role as manager. But time, I don't remember Leonard trying to change Rick, and he managed him for a little bit also. I just think he thought he saw an eye for talent, Leonard that is, and he may have seen some of it, but he's got to remember that these guys aren't him, and they're not going to be him. And to answer your question of like, was Leonard really trying to change him? I don't remember him being involved enough in the corner for that to happen. I remember him trying to sign a large number of fighters to be their manager, and I think he was going to try and go from managing into promoting. So starting low. I don't remember him being in the gym holding the mitts and teaching people at all from rumor. I remember him trying to sign talent and get them fights and get them exposure so he could be a good businessman in the sport, and wasn't his role. He was a great fighter, and a good commentator. Great eye for the sport by being able to commentate. But when it comes time for spotting talent and developing it into an attraction, that's not what Ray knew how to do.
I do recall Leonard at some point, but I don't know about the timeline, but he tried to get into training, because I remember in an interview, and I know this for a fact, he said in an interview that he said, I'm not cut out to be a trainer because when I've tried it, I've gotten frustrated. as it often happens with all-time greats. They try to tell guys to do something that would come natural to them as when they were in their primes, but these dudes, either like the skill, the ability, or whatever, they can recreate it, and thus the trainer ends up getting frustrated. Like, how come you can't do? I think I remember a story of him chasing a guy out of the ring, trying to physically assault him because he got so frustrated that the fighter couldn't do what he was telling him to. So I'm pretty
I
sure.
believe you
Yes.
believe that one, but I don't remember that story. What I do remember him saying very much along those lines of like it was too frustrating because he figured if I tell you, you can do it. And I remember I was in the chat not too long ago, and someone was saying all this crap about Buddy McGirt. Buddy hasn't been able to recreate the success he had when he first took over as a professional trainer for a lot of different guys. He got trainer of the year for a reason. He was able to add a lot of nuances to certain people's careers, and he did well with them. But the bottom line about him, whether he ever trains another world champion or not from the ground up or takes over someone's career and makes him better, he's a teacher. He can teach you how to box. Whether he can take you to another level or not, I don't know, but he is a teacher. So is, and I've been told the same thing about John David Jackson. He's a very good teacher when it comes time to being in someone's corner. Now, they may only be able to teach people that already have solid fundamentals and have already had an amateur career, because I've never heard of either one of them building someone from first walking into the gym to a championship. Not everybody can do that. But Ray Leonard was not a teacher. I don't know if Roy Jones is. Some people say he's really good at working with people in the gym. Floyd, remember, he said he was going to try and train people. He would have been terrible because, he's not a teacher. He's not articulate enough to be able to communicate with people. Look how he communicates with people right now. Everybody's a peon compared to him, and he's the greatest thing in the world. Teachers don't. That's not how you teach someone. I'm greater than you can ever be, so you can only hope to try and aspire to be a tenth of what I am. Okay, I'm going to find someone I can actually get along with. I'm going to find someone that's actually going to pass me something on and not treat me like a second-rate citizen, because you're not getting punched in anymore. I am. And that's kind of where that dynamic doesn't work.
That's a great point.
I did have a trouble with some of people that I would train because I didn't have a lot of quote unquote ring experience of being any ranked fantastic anything. But I had an eye for the sport, and I could teach people things that I saw from other fighters if they trusted me.
Right.
And some people were like, well, you've never been in the ring, like, with your nose bleeding and everything else. Well, no, I usually protected my nose. So it didn't bleed very often. But my point was, if they didn't trust me because I didn't get as far as them and I didn't have as many fights as them, okay, congratulations, let's shake hands. You go find someone else to work with in the gym. I'm going to work with this guy because this guy does trust me. And I understand a disconnect of someone saying, how good can you possibly be because you didn't go very far? Understood. I get it. I don't remember Eddie Futch being a multi-time Golden Gloves champion, Olympic gold medalist, or a world champion of a sword. And we know he's the greatest, one of the greatest trainers of all time. So, point being the fact that just because you have a talent at a certain level in sport doesn't mean you can do all of it. And Ray could not, Leonard could not teach people. He could show them how to do things, and he might have been able to give them pointers, but he wasn't a teacher. And if you can't teach, then you can't train.
This whole thing of trainers, sometimes the bar can be set a little bit too high for them. I was listening to the latest episode of Ringside Reporter. Shout out to those guys. And thanks again to those guys for showing up. The last episode that I hosted, which was featured them, that was a very good interview. I suggest people go look it up. But I was listening to the latest episode, and they were talking about how, I think they were talking about managers or promoters, and how a lot of people go criticize promoters for saying, well, they didn't take this guy from the ground up, which isn't exactly the easiest thing to do, and it's not like everybody does it now. Now, oftentimes a promoter, if they're a big-time promoter, like Don King used to do back in the day, they would see talent that had already been developed, and they would just scoop it up because they had a checkbook that allowed them to do so. And it's a little something similar with trainers. Seldom will you see a trainer bring a guy from the ground up. And the guys who can do that turn out to be exceptional, either turn out to be one-hit wonders or they turn out to be exceptional trainers. But it seldom works that way. Again, a trainer can be like a big time promoter. Somebody else takes him to near top or whatever, and then the manager or the promoter or whatever suggests, hey, maybe you should, if you really want to get to the top, you got to go with this trainer. And that's when people switch factions. But that's why I'm thinking it must have been surreal for Freddie Roach, who was a former professional fighter and who had participated under the tutelage of Eddie Futch as a trainer. And for him to be a trainer later on in the late 90s, 2000s, and meet Manny Pacquiao and hold the mitts for that dude for the first time and say, okay, this kid, and then watch him in spar and say, okay, this kid's got heart, he's got incredible hand speed, and more importantly, or perhaps just as importantly, I should say, the power. That incredible mix of speed and power that you seldom get from every other boxer. He must have been, I mean, I don't want to sound crude here, but his pants must have stretched a little bit when he saw that he had a potential a potential threat in his hands. Because again, so many trainers out there pray for that type of guy to show up to the doorstep. The kid who's got speed, power, whatever, some intangible, something special, an X factor, the it factor, whatever you want to call it. Some guys spend their whole lives looking for that, and they never do. They're good trainers. They're good, competent trainers. They just, maybe it's because of location or whatever, but they just never make it. So if it's difficult to be a professional boxer, it seems like it's even more difficult to be a trainer in the pro ranks. Very difficult. Very difficult. Chief, the other thing I wanted to mention here about that is, speaking of Eddie Futch, and I'm just giving away some of these issues here to people if they want to look him up. Look up the March 2002 edition. It's got Tyson on the cover of Ring Magazine, and that's where they do. That's when Eddie Futch passed away, and they had a retrospective on Eddie Futch. So that's the March 2002 edition, and you get a little bit of insight about what people thought at the time of Eddie Futch, who many consider to be, if not the greatest trainer of all time, definitely one of the top 10. And that is high praise because this is a sport that's been around in its current incarnation for about 100 plus years. So to be one of the greatest trainers of all time, top 10 in that long history, that's high praise. So go check that one out.
Well, when you can train two different limited fighters to beat Muhammad Ali, who's considered the greatest ever fighter, and when you've got Angelo Dundee was more the cornerman than he was the trainer. Point being, if you can train two different guys to do that, and remember how limited Ken Norton was. I'm not going to say he was garbage because I think someone else said that earlier tonight. That's never left my my lips. But when you can get a guy as limited as him to do that, and to not only beat him once, but arguably beat him 3 times, and then of course you got Joe Frazier to do the same thing, and then you end up training someone like Riddick Bowe to win the heavyweight title. Along with the numerous other people he trained in his career, you got something going for you. You know, you obviously can do something very well. You can teach.
They talked about that in the article about how, everyone says, well, a good trainer has got to be analytical, which is true. But apparently the way people speak about Eddie Futch in that article is that it went beyond that with him. In fact, he said when it came to Muhammad Ali's style, I just couldn't see any of my fighters having trouble with it. It seemed like he was dialed into that Muhammad Ali style, that he knew how to beat it. And in fact, I remember Cos D'Amato back in the 1960s, he said that he didn't like Muhammad Ali's style because he said it was ripe for the picking. I'm paraphrasing here, but what do you think? Do you think, it's easier said than done, but what was it about Eddie Futch that he managed to get Joe Frazier and Ken Norton to beat Muhammad Ali?
Well, let's look at one last thing. One of the last people he ever trained was Montel Griffin for the first Roy Jones fight. And if you remember, even if Roy was about to come on and win that fight, all the way up until Griffin took that knee and got stunned, Roy had his hands completely full. And against a fighter that you would consider a lesser fighter, a lesser athlete. Well, I think Joe Frazier and Ken Norton were both lesser athletes than Muhammad Ali. But Eddie Futch just knew how to prepare guys. And he trained long, lanky boxers too. He worked with Alexis Arguello. He trained people to fight on the outside also. But he knew how to teach a pressure fighter how to neutralize someone like Muhammad Ali. He just did. I don't know what he saw on how to do that to prepare these people, but he could. And I'm not saying I can teach anybody to do these things, but I learned things from what he shared about that. I learned that, and somehow or another, some of that tutelage transferred out, like Vernon Forrest hinted at also before. Shane Mosley was a better athlete and way faster than he could ever be. Okay, that's great. But what did Vernon have? Timing and a jab. And what did he say? Guys, if you're fighting someone faster, what do? Use your jab. So he used his jab to use timing to throw Mosley's timing off. And Frazier actually used a jab in those fights. He got underneath it and he jabbed towards Ali's chest, and that would get him close enough to be able to land the punches he wanted. And he stayed out of that crouch because Ali was swinging over Frazier's head, leaving opening. And that got him close enough because Frazier was able to move forward out of that crouch. Some fighters can't do that. Paulie Malignaggi is one of them. He even said so when McGirt would teach him how to, he would fight out of the crouch and fight low, and he couldn't move in and out the way he wanted to. So he couldn't do both. Mike Tyson, and trained by Customato, and Joe Frazier, trained by Eddie Futch, could move forward while staying low. And then when you're reaching for them, your hands are low, you're swinging over their head, you've got openings, and they know how to punch around and from the outside where you can't see it. And I guess that's just how he saw this. I would never would have seen it, but
Hey, by the way, this is in the days before videotape. I mean, you couldn't just go, you couldn't just record something. First of all, I don't think people had VHS back in the 60s. That was more a 70s thing, and even then, those were expensive. And I mean, you had to get some film reels if you wanted to rewatch fights. So the fact that Eddie Futch was doing this off the fly, really, makes you wonder. Speaking of which, I don't know which one it is because I have it in physical copy, but there was a 2005 Ring Magazine edition. So just go 2005, you'll probably find it. It's not like there's that many, which was about the greatest trainers of all time. And that was a big debate because you had, Eddie Futch, Ray Arcel. Is that how you pronounce it? I never understood. Ray Arcel or Arcel?
I thought it was Ray Arcel.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
That's the way my mentor taught me to say it.
They mentioned the German guy who used to train the Klitschko's and Michalowski. I forget his name. They mentioned Brandon Ingle. They mentioned when they went into the contemporary thing, Nacho Berenstein, Johnny Lewis, the Australian one, and who they mentioned Joe Goosen. Joe Goosen. That was 2005.
They mentioned an Argentinian guy. I don't remember his name, but he got voted in the Hall of Fame in 2007.
Right. I think he just recently passed away in the last 5 years, I believe. He trained.
He was very nice. It was hard to have a conversation because we didn't speak the same language, but he's an incredibly kind guy. I just walked right up to him and I had a pen and paper in my hand, and he obviously signed the autograph. And I just tried to say I was a big fan of boxing. He understood enough to where he just grabbed my when he went to shake my hand, he did the double handshake. So he did the handshake and he put another one over, and he just kind of one of those endearing kind of handshakes, and then just kind of bowed his head a little bit, and knew the fact we weren't going to be able to have a conversation because I didn't speak enough Spanish, but he didn't just kind of sign it, and very kind guy.
Sounds like he was coming on to you a little bit. Maybe you never know. No, but
I think Carmen Basilio came on to my wife.
I wouldn't be surprised. That guy was a bit of a maniac. I mean, all you had to do was watch him fight. Some guys are that way. Some guys are well, I mean, we know for a fact that you thought Vargas was hitting on your wife. And that
Vargas had his hand on her hip.
Oh, geez.
I mean, I got a picture of it. I didn't make this up. This is real. What Basilio did was when I met him, first of all, he punched me. And then when he shook her hand, you know how dirty old men will do a handshake and they'll slide the middle finger on the palm? That's exactly what he did to her. Yeah, so when he went to shake her hand, he grabbed her hand and then he slid his middle finger on the palm of her hand. And then he smiled and she just kind of laughed. So
you didn't laugh. You stepped up.
I didn't know he did it. I was already moving over to sit down and have lunch with Hagler and Duran. So
see, the chief is just dropping names. So I'm sitting there having dinner with Marvin Hagler and Roberto Duran. It's like, well, that's just an afterthought, to the big story. Okay. That was that.
Quick sum up to that one, because that's not what this show is about with my 2007 experience. But I met Hagler's son at this golf tournament, and there's a place where you can meet the fighters when they're sitting down eating, they don't want to be bothered. Mm-hmm. But I was sitting talking to Hagler's son because he's from Atlanta. I'm from Georgia, and so we're talking about things. Well, his dad came up and sat down, and then Duran was signing autographs, and Duran would get mad when people would give him a hand full of things to sign. Because he knew it was for eBay, and he got mad and just stormed off and came up, sat down next to Hagler's son. So I'm sitting at the fighter table with Hagler, Duran, and only because I was with Hagler's son talking, and this one bodyguard was coming to shoo me away, and the guy goes, "No," and Hagler's son was like, "No, we're talking. He's with me." And because he had the credentials, he left me alone. But so then I just sat there and I'm just kind of kept my mouth shut. And my wife's standing over in the corner, and I'm mouthing to her. I said, "I'm at a table with Hagler and Duran." She goes, "I know," and she takes a picture of it and of me sitting with the three of them. So okay, sorry, I didn't mean to steal stories. It's your show, sir.
No, I mean, you're part of the show too. You can tell any story you want. That is an amazing story right there, and that
was a great year.
I'm envious. I'd like to make it to the Hall of Fame. There, visit it one day. Although again, it's a little watered down now, but nevertheless, why not? By the way, I'm looking for the article that I told you about the top trainer. I know it was Ring Magazine, and I want to say it was 2005, but as I'm looking for it, I forget which issue it is because I have it in the physical copy, but I'm looking through the archives here digitally, and I can't seem to find it. Hopefully, maybe somebody can let us know, but I know it's there somewhere. Double L in the chat says Chief was gonna call ICE on Vargas. you were gonna call.
Oh, that's what get his ass deported. That's what that. Okay, no. No, Vargas is 100% American. I knew that already.
Well, maybe. Well, ICE doesn't know that though. They see brown skin and they go, you know what? Let's get him. Let's get that boy. I'm kidding, but I don't want to politicize this show. But Chief, moving on to another thing. This is actually kind of disheartening. When I read some of these old magazines and I see how little things have changed. But this one actually brings up a good point too that I want to get your thoughts on. This is from which one? Yeah, this is the Ring Magazine edition, March 1997 edition, okay? They got Mike Tyson on the cover. And this is from Jeff Ryan's column. And I believe Don King at this time was going through some sort of court proceeding. I don't know if it was on tax evasion or whatever, but he'd been in court recently. And he managed to beat the charges. So the article, the column is called Don King is Out of Our Hair. That's the name of the title of the column, rather. This time, Don did knock out the government's court case with a clean counterpunch, but he still managed to eke out a technical draw. That means King remains on. Long live the King? Maybe it's time to acknowledge that Don King is boxing's most powerful promoter and that he's here to stay. In Bounce vs. King, the federal government is O forever. His throne and the feds are forced to plot yet another new fight plan for the next rematch. Good luck. Cats wish they had as many lives as King, but I'm not complaining anymore. In fact, I'm starting to think boxing's balance of power is a lot like that of the Middle East. King may be, as George Foreman once said, the Saddam Hussein of boxing. But you get rid of Saddam, and the region's other tyrants, suddenly unchecked, become more arrogant than they are now. No matter what else he does, King consistently puts on the best cards, and the thought of mismatch masters Arum and Duva controlling the game by themselves is pretty frightening. No more King would probably mean no more fight cards with 4 world title fights on them, no more quality Showtime shows, and no more chances to see the likes of Ricardo Lopez and Frankie Randall. The King isn't dead, so what the hell? Long live the King. So, in that short column, he said a lot. Also, how there's very few promoters out there as savvy as Don King, and back then you had Bob Arum too. Those guys controlled pretty much, almost turned boxing into a monopoly of sorts. Now you got Eddie Hearn, who's sort of joked in the past that he would be willing to sell his company to the Sheik. Then you got De La Hoya quarreling with the Zone. You got Ryan Garcia, can't wait to leave him. Now it seems like Virgil Ortiz is joining in the ranks. You got Top Rank, devoid of a prime Bob Arum. Now the reins are being taken by his stepson or son-in-law or whoever he might be. They don't have a TV deal. Apparently, they might be on Stars. That's what they said months ago, but we've still yet to see them grace those airwaves. Meanwhile, they're on Tubi and passing on their fighters to other shows on the Zone and so on. You got the PBC on its throes, putting on 6 shows per year, if that. And the only one really seems to be standing right now is Dana White coming in with a whole bunch of money and a network or an app in Paramount Plus. And now a lot of people are saying, well, excuse me?
Everything froze for a second on my phone, but I got you loud and clear now.
Okay. So you got Dana White and the other people with the Zuffa TKO. They've got Paramount Plus. It seems like that now people are shaking in their boots, thinking, well, with all these other guys weakened, maybe Dana White will be able to take over. And that's the point that this guy was making. Jeff Ryan was making in the column that I read, that if you would have taken out Don King, you would have gotten a bunch of other promoters jumping into the fray. But who knows if they would have been able to give us the product? Because you've talked about how much you enjoy those cards, those mega cards. Don King, where you had Chavez, Terry Norris, Ricardo Lopez, and that wasn't even the main event. Do you think right now, the way it's going, that we do need a sort of Don King to come out and take over boxing? Because the way it's been going right now, not too good. What do you think?
Yeah. So sometimes in life, you need necessary evils for things to really take off and be successful. And Don King, as a promoter, was great for the fan, but bad for the fighter. He promised the world. Don't know what he delivered on. He probably delivered more than these fighters had prior to him getting involved. That didn't mean he delivered on what he promised. But yeah, those cards were amazing. They had everything you'd want on them because most of them were decent cards because the fights lived at least partially up to expectations. And then if you bought them, which I was fool enough to do back then because there wasn't a streaming, that's why you got to see a lot of Terry Norris and Azuma Nelson and guys like that because those were the fighters that were on those cards. Sometimes he'd put them on regular Showtime, but boxing had already moved from free TV onto premium by this time. Tuesday Night Fights was still on, but those guys weren't gracing those airwaves. So when you wanted to find the premium guys, it was on a Don King card.
Mm-hmm.
Showtime was destroying HBO because your who's who of your pound for pound rankings or your guys close to the top of the pound for pound rankings were all Don King. Gerald McClellan, Azuma Nelson, Ricardo Lopez, Cesar Chavez, Felix Trinidad, all these guys that were getting close to these rankings of moving up the rankings of pound for pound, or in Chavez's case, starting to slightly move down almost gracefully, or your up and coming guys or guys that didn't get a chance otherwise, like your Frankie Reynolds, they were all coming from Showtime and Don King, Michael Nunn, all these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So HBO's having James Toney, which is a really good fighter, but he really didn't capture everyone's imagination of a classy guy. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't that he wasn't entertaining. He just wasn't a mainstream box office attraction. And Dom's throwing like 5-6 championship fights on one pay-per-view that cost $30. So the fans were getting their money's worth. The fighters probably weren't getting what they were getting. How do you make both ends meet of the fighters not getting taken advantage of in the end while the fans are getting the most for their money? When you can figure that out, you're going to have boxing as the greatest sport of all time for years. In the meantime, yes, you do need something like a Don King that's going to put a lot of fighters out there on platforms that people can see so they can develop a following so people get entertained by him.
I mean, I know money is a big part of why sometimes we don't get these fights, but look at what the Sheik was able to accomplish as soon as he really took over the reins in late 2023. We've seen some of the best boxing cards in recent years. And now that he's sort of trying to maneuver his way in with TKO and sort of leave behind the guys that he propped up in the last couple of years, all these other dudes like Matchroom and Golden Boy and to a certain extent Top Rank, they were complaining, oh, what are we going to do? We're starting to see a bit of a union now between Golden Boy and the PBC. That's why they're holding that joint card between Mario Barrios and Ryan Garcia, and the undercard's pretty good. However, and I was talking with Bucho about this, we're talking about 1999, right? And we're talking about some of the pay-per-views that we had that year. Del Hoya of K versus Corte and against Trinidad, pay-per-view worthy. Holyfield versus Lewis 1 and 2, pay-per-view worthy, 1999. And I might be missing one or two, right? But for the most part, if you had HBO, you get to see Sugar Shane Mosley, Felix Trinidad, Roy Jones, Fernando Vargas, Marco Antonio Barrera, Eric Morales, these guys, right? We used to see them. And maybe 4 pay-per-views. Now, within the space of a couple of weeks, we've got a whole bunch of pay-per-views. We just had Shakur Stevenson versus Teofimo Lopez, which again, two top guys, but certainly not pay-per-view attractions. And now we got Barrios versus Garcia and another pay-per-view card. I mean, that's things haven't really gotten better as far as it goes being a boxing fan. And that's what gets me, Chief. That's what gets me about all these people complaining. Oh, what about the fighters? What about the fighters? What about the fans? We don't matter at all? We got to eat shit for 10 years? or more.
You
I mean, if you
don't have any fighters if you don't have fans.
exactly. Exactly. But they
'Cause
seem to
this
forget that.
generation, especially, is not doing this for anything other than money.
Mhm.
So you don't have fans to try and put something out there for a product to be put out there for someone to try and purchase. Then you don't have a fighter because they're not.
Very
They
well said.
don't. This idea of I'll fight for free because they literally would have because they wanted to be that tough and show the pride of showing how tough they are.
Uh-huh.
That's long and gone. That does not exist anymore. This is
If it
about
existed at all.
prestige. I'm pretty sure Jake LaMotta would have fought people for free.
Right, but all 12 rounders training and all that for free, I don't think so. 15 rounders, I should say. You know what I mean? But by the way, now I understand your point, though. I understand your point, but I mean, again, it's ridiculous for people to talk about the fight because I don't know if you've how much you've been paying attention to because I know you're a little bit out there with the boxing right now. But like I said, Top Rank has no TV deal right now. Months ago, they said that they were going to migrate over to Stars. We haven't seen them there, and I haven't heard anything about that. Top Rank, again, without Bob Arum, it seems like they're regressing. Golden Boy is poised to lose Ryan Garcia and Virgil Ortiz. Those are the two big names and the two biggest guys they've got a chance to make something happen for the future. They might be losing those guys. Then you've got Eddie Hearn. He's got Shakur Stevenson, but he's not exactly pound for pound box office appeal guy there. And he's never really broke into the U.S. market. And I don't think he's going to break in there with Shakur Stevenson. And then you've got PBC in their death throes. And now people are quaking in their boots about, Dana White. And what do they use to try to get sympathy? The fighters. He's not going to pay the fighters what they're worth. And I'm thinking, look, the rumor is Teofimo Lopez and Shakur Stevenson got $10 million each for their fight. That's not a pay-per-view fight. When you think pay-per-view, you think, and there's not that many out there, but you think Crawford versus Canelo. That's a mainstream fight. That's that type of fight where people that don't know about boxing hear about that. So the Sheik came in with the checkbook. He made these fights, but now he's going on over with Dana White and all these other people because there's a whole bunch of people on that board or whatever. And a lot of us are starting to think, well, maybe this is what boxing needs. Again, I don't know if they're going to screw it up. I don't think anybody can tell for a fact because we don't have crystal balls. But the way boxing has been going for the last 30 years, it hasn't really been getting that much better, if it has even gotten better. In fact, I think people could argue it's been getting worse. So would it really be the worst thing in the world if somebody comes in here and grabs the reins and says, listen, we're going to change a couple of things, but at the end of the day, the fans are going to end up winning by getting the fights that they deserve. No more overpaying, no more marinating fights. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Well, how can you do all of that at once is the question. And no one's got the answer. But how do you not over marinate, but marinate enough to where people want to see it to where it's going to generate money? Because let's face it, it's a combat sport for us as entertainers, but the way you make it happen is through business. Mm-hmm. So dollars have to make sense. And eventually the Sheik is going to want to turn a profit. I've said this for a while now, and it still hasn't reached that level. Mm-hmm. But eventually it's going to be like someone that he answers to is going to say, look, we're shelling out all this money and nothing's coming back in return as far as like profits are concerned. What are we doing and why are we doing it? Right. What are we getting out of this? Because no business can fully, well, if you look at the country like this country as a business, America's been running on a deficit since before Ronald Reagan was president. So maybe you can run out of a deficit for God only knows how long. But 90% of the time, a real business that really produces things has to turn a profit sometime or people pull the plug. So you can pay these fighters what they want, that they think they're worth. That's the other problem. If you're paying them what they think they're worth, then when something finally comes up and this false floor may, open up and, drop down, then that's great. The next person to step in is going to be like, okay, we want to make these fights happen. Well, I've been paid this much by all these guys for the past 5 years. Well, you're not dealing with them anymore. You're dealing with me. Well, I'm not going to fight for that. Then you're not going to fight. And exactly. There's usually where it comes around too. Don King was having some of that problem back in the day. He didn't have enough showtimes, ironically on Showtime, pardon the pun, to put people out there. Because I remember he had Keith Holmes, he had William Joppy, he had, I'm trying to remember all the second tier fighters he had, meaning not the mainstream names. So Simon Brown was on the way down, and Vincent Petway was making a name for himself. So he had all these other people outside of your Chavez, your Trinidads, and your Tysons, and they weren't your Zuma Nelsons and Terry Norris's either. So there are all these other guys that he's throwing on these regular, like when Showtime's giving you a free week, that's when your Strong Bay Mitches and those guys are getting put on TV. Well, that's great, but you're not really seeing them any other time. And you eventually get to the point to where these guys are stuck in lifelong contracts, like they were with PBC, like they were with Don King. It eventually backfired on Don King because he had too big of a stable. And that's why several years ago, when you heard me say, my theory was that Al's looking to reduce inventory.
Right.
And so he's letting some of these people go other places. That's what Don King did. He let some fighters go because they weren't going to make him any money. And just them sitting, wasting time on a shelf wasn't doing anybody good. So he was farming them off. Now, how does it relate to Sheik? Sheik's just writing checks right now. Eventually, these guys are going to want he's going to want something back out of it. And he may take back in money like Don King used to do. And as it appears, the way Al was doing for Floyd and not telling him about it. I'm not going to insult the man's integrity, say that's what he does, but boxing's historically famous for people doing that. Because after you've put so much time and money into someone and you're doing all this stuff to write checks to keep them happy because they're the biggest thing going right now, once they quit being that draw, you want to try and get something back out of it. That's what 90% of the time, that's what usually ends up happening. You hear of a fallout between a fighter and a promoter or manager because they were taking more money than they were supposed to. And usually it's because there was a deficit and they needed to get the money back.
Absolutely. I mean,
hopefully.
Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Well, first of all, excellent points. And like I keep saying, is Dana White a saint and all the people involved in that new venture are there? No, it's a business. You got to cut a couple of throats. That's why they call it a cutthroat business. It could have turned out that things might go wrong. When the PBC first started, I've said it numerous times, I was excited because back in those days, in 2015, it was still, TV was still a big deal. Like, whoa, boxing on TV? And I remember this was 3 years before the Zone came along in the boxing business. So TV was still the go-to place to catch boxing. I mean, or that if you had the hope that maybe boxing would enter a renaissance. And then year after year, you started realizing, oh boy, these guys are really screwing up. And not for nothing, but look at where the PBC is at now. And as a boxing fan, you don't want to see an outfit fail. And by the way, I think people also underrate PBC a little bit. Like, yeah, did they burn through $500 million and all that? Yeah, but it wasn't all crap. They did put on some good fights. They did make some big fights that we wanted to see, or at least compelling fights. But nobody wanted them. I don't think anybody out there wanted them to lose from the get-go. And it's the same thing that they did with Dana White. Are they going to screw up? Maybe. But right now, I'm rooting for something to change. I want more boxing. I don't know if you caught the last Paramount Plus card, Chief, but it was actually pretty good. Hot Rod Kalashdik against an old Alexander Gvozdyk turned out to be way more entertaining than anybody expected. You had Boachuk versus Butaev. Pretty good scrap for as long as it went. Was it 10 rounds? And then the main event was Asabache, what's his name? Mexican dude, Asabache versus Rayo Valenzuela. Again, decent fight. I wasn't bored. And these were all bargain level, what I like to call bargain bin fights. They're not the fights that you're going to catch on the Zone as a main event or on, or actually, let's go back. They're not the fights that you would even catch on Boxing After Dark. There were more ESPN Friday Night Fights level cards. But we don't have any of those anymore. We don't have a place where some of these low-level guys can go out there and get some activity, get a couple of rounds. I mean, we got Pro Box now, and on top of that, we got Paramount Plus. And we need more type of those things so that some of these dudes can stay active. I'm tired of seeing a pay-per-view where half the roster in there hasn't fought in over a year. You're not getting the best of these guys.
Yeah, no, I think Steve Kim said we're starting to see the feel-out rounds are lasting for almost half the fight now. Whereas a guy used to be like maybe 3 rounds tops of feeling someone out. Now it's minimum of 4 up to almost 6. And 2020 was COVID, and I get that, but that's what Lomachenko started doing, was spending almost a majority of the first half downloading everything, and then he started coming on. And when he would come on, well, it was a spectacular performance, and someone would usually quit. Or when he made it too close, like he did with Tszyu, then he came up short. I don't want to hear anyone say that he did the same thing with Haney, because I can't find 7 rounds Haney won in that fight. I've been looking for 3 years now and still haven't found it yet. Point being, the fact though that if he was fighting 3 or 4 times a year, he probably would have had to take 4 or 5 rounds to warm up.
Maybe. I mean, then again, he had an injury, but your point still stands, because it's not if he would have only been that one, yeah, but there was a bunch of other fights where the commentators keep bringing up the downloading aspect. He's downloading the data, which, by the way, they keep overusing now. But it also brings up another point here, Chief, about these guys not being active enough, because I don't think we're getting the best out of certain young fighters. Give an example. I'm looking at Miguel Cotto's career here. And this is a guy who had one of the best early guided careers in boxing. Again, back in those days, Top Rank really knew how to guide a career. So Miguel Cotto fought 6 times in 2001, first year as a pro. But 6 times, he didn't start in the beginning of the year. I think it was June 2001 or something like that. So the fact that they were able to cram in 6 fights, okay, 7 times in 2002, and then 5 times in 2003. So by the time that he gets to his 2004 year, he's got 18 bouts. And some of the names that he fought, I remember, Ubaldo Hernandez, who'd given another prospect in Juan the Baby Bull Diaz such a tough fight that Baby Bull Diaz was crying afterwards, which a lot of people criticize him for. He also beat Cesar Bazan, former lightweight titleist. He also beat, what was his name? Dimitrios Ceballos, Colombian guy, another like perennial French contender.
The one that Shea knocked out.
Exactly. And and he beat Carlos Mausa, who had beaten in 2003. Had beaten I forget the guy's name. It was a Hispanic prospect for 2. I forget the guy's name. So you see what type of mix of guys he was fighting. He was fighting contenders or former contenders, titleists who were past their peak, but who knew how to take a punch and who knew how to roll with the punch, and more importantly, knew how to punch back. He was also fighting spoilers like Carlos Mausa and Ubaldo Hernandez. And so by the time he gets to his 4th year as a pro, he's got a pretty good resume, a pretty good dossier. Nowadays, you see some of these dudes, they're in their 4th year, they're already getting pushed for a title shot, and they only have 10 fights. That's the new order. And I don't know if we're getting the best out of these youngins because they're not fighting that often. What do you think?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I usually am one that like goes on my own rants, but I think you said everything that I would have said myself.
You know what? Just to fact check here, Abdullah Mason is one of the best prospects out there right now. Uber prospect. Everybody's talking about how he's the anointed one. So let's just compare his career right now. How many fights has he had so far? And so far, he has had 20 fights. And he started out in 2021. So that's about 4 years now as a professional. Okay, so it seems like he's a guy that they've taken him on the same route as the old school days. Well, let's see. He fought only once in 2021. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in 2022. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in 2023. Okay, so you see there's a bit of a drop-off here. It's not the worst, but at least they've kept him active. I guess I'm talking about guys like Josh Taylor, Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo Lopez. Those dudes, if you look at their records early, it seems like they weren't getting that many fights. And in fact, somebody else in the chat says, Sean Rain says, 29-year-old prospects nowadays, BDA. Yeah, that's the other thing.
Well, some of the 29-year-old prospects are international. They're more from the former Soviet bloc area. They went to 2 Olympics. So that's a minimum of 8 years right there, their career, being taken up by the amateurs, not counting when they were younger. But instead of turning pro right out of an Olympics at 17, they're sticking around for another 4 years. And then by the time we hear of them, you've got to move quick or else you're going to miss their peak. So, or unless they're peaking when they're turning pro.
Mm-hmm.
So you've really got to get them in at around 10 fights or you're going to lose an investment on something. So you kind of have to look at who they are and where they're from on to why some of them are getting title shots a lot sooner. When it's talking about our guys coming from this side of the world, whether it's Canada, Mexico, or America, they're going to turn pro younger. So if they're younger and they've had, say, maybe 100 amateur fights, but they're only 17 years old, well, when they turn pro anyway, and then they're like 19 to 21 by the time we're hearing about them, but they only have a handful of fights. That's a different story. When you're any of the guys that came from Uzbekistan and they went to 2 Olympics and they have 300 amateur fights and they're training with other professional fighters from that country and they're grown men when they turn pro. Yeah, they're probably going to get 10 fights because if they're 22 and it takes them 3 years to get a shot, then you're almost missing their peak.
That's a fine art. Yeah, that's a fine art that they got to tune there. And experienced matchmakers and promoters know that. But, nowadays, if that knowledge starts getting lost, like you said, whoopsie daisy, all of a sudden, watch out.
Well, let's look at Madrimov. He only had less than 10 fights when he finally came up to the world title scene. He had the controversial fight with that one gentleman that he hit after the bell, and then he rematched the guy I don't remember the result, but he came out on top. Eventually got a world title shot, but he also had an extensive amateur career. So he finally got to the title level. He's not done as a fighter. He can probably still pull off some upsets and get some good title shots and beat some fringe guys to stay in the mix, but his peak's done.
Right.
He's never going to get better than he is right now. He's not going to get better than he was when he fought Crawford. That's the best he was ever going to be. Now, whether it's because he was never going to be a great fighter or because he spent too much time in the amateurs, one day when we're watching this Fantasy Fights in Heaven, we're going to get that answer too. Right now, all we know is what we got in front of us is a guy that's in his early to mid 30s who has less than 25 fights or right at 25 at most. And he's on the downside of his career because his peak was while he was a prospect.
That's every once in a while some of these guys can make up for that, but oftentimes it seems like the timelines are all askew. And I wanted to go back to something that there was a fight on Friday from Mexico. It was televised by DAZN, and it was Adrian Curiel ended up losing a decision to a guy by the name of Christian Medina, both Mexicans. Now, Christian Medina, you look at his record, he has got 19 wins. No, excuse me, what am I talking about here? 27 wins. 27 wins, 4 losses, 19 knockouts. So you're thinking, okay, what's the point of this? Well, if you look at his career early on, he turned pro at about 18 years old, right about, I think, the 18 mark. He turned pro in 2017. By 2020, he's got 16 fights, 13 wins, 3 losses, right? And he's lost to guys that you'll probably never see again anywhere. By the time it's 2023, he loses a decision to Ryosuke Nishida, who just recently, last year, lost to Nakatani in a unification bout. So, okay, he loses a decision to that guy. No shame there. So that was August 2023. Since August 2023, he's notched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wins, including the last one against Curiel. And he's only 25 years old. So it seems like in Mexico, they're still doing the same things over there. Some of these dudes, they turn pro at 17, 18. They take a couple of losses, but by the time they're in their mid-20s, they've already got experience. And they're tough.
They're seasoned fighters.
Their skin is tough because they've been matched tough against some of these dudes that have unimpressive records but who are very tough. And then before you know it, they bring a guy from Mexico and you think, this guy's going to be easy pickings. Next thing you know, they're pulling off an upset. So it seems like in Mexico, they're still doing things the way they've been doing it for a while now. But
your fighters like Julio Cesar Chavez, and I guess you throw Canelo in there too, of young guys being undefeated and not having any losses on the way up. They're few and far between, even though Mexicans having Hispanic fighters in general, but particularly Mexico, having very large records and being successful fighters. Argentinians and Colombians and some of the people from those areas will have really impressive records in their own country, but once they leave, they usually don't do well. For some reason, Mexican fighters are able to still perform at the elite level outside of their country, at least as far as being in America. I don't know about being world travelers. And I'm off the cuff on this, so don't take everything I say as absolute. My point is this. a lot of them do suffer either cuts or knockout losses as teenagers fighting grown men. Like Rafael Marquez, I think he got knocked out in his first pro fight. He fought former world champion in his first pro fight.
Jeez, Louise.
He was a teenager fighting a grown man, former world champion in his first pro fight. Yeah, he got knocked out. Come on, but he turned out to be a very good fighter, borderline great fighter. Won titles in 2 weight classes and is in the Hall of Fame because of his wars with Israel Vasquez. So he was a seasoned fighter by the time he got to the top and fought. Mark Johnson may have been on his way down, but he had enough seasoning from some of his setbacks and his victories to turn him into someone who was ready to expose the fact that Mark Johnson what he wasn't used to be.
Right.
And it was his seasoning that got him there, not just the fact that Mark Johnson was not quite what he once was and was fighting too high of a weight class. It was a combination of both. He had everything he needed to pursue that from being a seasoned veteran, a young seasoned veteran at that. So, like I said, not every Mexican fighter that comes up, not all of your Barreras, Morales was a little bit different. He was a high-ranked amateur, if I'm correct, because he was still less than 20 fights, if I'm correct, when he fought Zaragoza. But Zaragoza's another one. Just 50-some-odd fights, an old warhorse, been in a lot of tough battles all the way through his career, and that made him the champion that he was.
That's right.
Chavez, Barrera, and Canelo being undefeated with all these and still having great records particularly from Mexico. I remember that being few and far between. I remember them usually having losses on the way up by the time they got there, but that made them better fighters.
Well, Jose Luis Castillo coming out of nowhere, seemingly in the United States, and beating Stevie Johnson back in 2000. I mean, some of his fights had been televised in Mexico, but again, this is 2000. Not everybody had access to those fights. And meanwhile, he'd been preparing himself by sparring Julio Chavez for all those years. And he's got 40-something fights or 30-something fights by the time he fights Stevie Johnson. The people watching at home, they think, okay, this guy's got an unimpressive record. I've never seen anybody on his record before, so who's he? He's probably just a stiff. Next thing you know, Stevie Johnson's in the fight. So just goes to show you can never take anybody lightly because you just don't know what type of fighter they are. And even if you watch them fight, you never know if the best version is going to show up on that night. So it's a very difficult endeavor, boxing. That's for sure. That's why a lot of these guys don't fight enough now. 2 times a year. I think most of these young guys are content with that. Speaking of the Ring Magazine archives that we were talking about earlier, I found another Jeff Ryan column, and this one is from the same one, that March 1997 edition, when he was talking about Don King. This time he's bemoaning the existence of so many alphabet organizations. There is only one champion per division. A few years ago, there were rumors that the WBA and WBC might merge in an effort to run the IBF out of business. That never happened. And before you knew it, the WBO, WBF, IBC, and a whole bunch of other crazy letter combinations started appearing like new, more drug-resistant strains of a horrible virus. These renegade ruling bodies can't possibly survive, can they? You bet they can. Especially when there's always an ESPN2 around to broadcast the WBF's Redneck Rumbles. All right, now, he didn't need to throw rednecks under the bus, but this was from 1997. 29 years ago. And things have only gotten worse. Because the WBO, which in those times, you mentioned, did he mention the WBO? Hold on. Well, he mentioned the WBO, but it wasn't considered one of the big, the big three were the IBF, WBA, WBC. The WBA was considered an afterthought. It was a European, something that European guys held on to before they actually tried to make it onto the world stage. Now the WBO is one of the big four. Undisputed in the four-belt era. And I'm thinking, man, things got worse since 1997. Chief, the TKO and Zuffa have said that they want to rely on the Ring Magazine rankings and the Ring Magazine title. Will we ever see the alphabet organizations disappear or at least lose a lot of their power?
That's a good question. There was a time in, I think it was late 90s, early 2000s, where the Ring reestablished their belt. And fighters like Bernard Hopkins were taking it seriously. At the same time, in the early 90s is when the WBO started establishing itself because fighters like, Bob Arum wasn't good with him. I'll just put it that way. But Tommy Hearns had a belt, had it for a little bit. Hector Camacho had it, and so certain fighters were using it to call themselves a champion. And Ray Mercer, Tommy Morrison, those guys were fighting for it, and Riddick Bowe picked it up. So it was gaining traction, but it was still a placeholder to try and get you ranked towards the other three major bodies. Back to is anything ever going to take these away? It's only going to be as relevant, like the Ring Magazine belt, as people are going to be able to see it and know about it. The Ring was very adamant about through HBO. HBO's rankings were using the Ring, the Bible of boxing. Max Kellerman was talking about it on Friday Night Fights. It had a wide range of publicity for it to be a legitimate situation of considering it a real belt, even if it wasn't a sanctioning body. But there was a ranking structure behind it in their magazine rankings. They had a method of how you got to be to the top. Everything kind of went with it to where there was momentum behind it. Now, Ring Magazine also kind of was no longer on the shelves. It kind of went straight digital. And I don't know if that's what hurt it or not, but it kind of went sideways and didn't really stay relevant as far as the fans wanting to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Can it come back? Yes, but you have to have it as a way to where people are able to see that as the pinnacle of achieving something. And they don't have it right now. They did, but like I said, when magazines started to change and go sideways, it lost its momentum. So can they do it? Yes, but they have to give it back, and they have to get it back in a way that people are going to recognize it as the standard, the golden standard of ranking, of a ranking system and a quote unquote championship organization. How they do that in this world, I don't know, but they can. But it's been done before. They can do it again. It has to be something that all boxing fans are going to be made aware of, and casuals are going to have to learn the process of what it is, and why is that one more important than all these other ones that Tyson and Roy Jones and Floyd Mayweather and all these other people that they're going to talk about used to have. What's going to put this one above that? If they can get that out there, they can do it again.
Well, that you bring up some good points, because what I do is I look at the Ring Magazine rankings, the ESPN rankings, and then somebody brought this up a couple of years ago on one of the members in the chat brought up the transnational boxing rankings. I'm going to put them up on the screen here, the website. I think that's it. Hopefully it's not something porn related, but the transnational rankings right there. So between those three, you sort of manage to get to the truth and the crux of the issue. The problem with Ring Magazine and all that, like you said, it's well, first of all, most people don't know about it, most casuals, and that's one of the big questions whenever a casual first enters into the fray. He goes, well, what are all these titles? What does that mean? Who's the champion? Who's the best? You got 4 alphabet organizations. You got 2 different designations for some of them, to the point where you might have 6 people per division walking around with a belt around their waist. So it's very difficult for a newbie to come in here and really make sense of what's what. On top of that, the Ring Magazine, they can't enforce the mandatory. I mean, they can strip a guy if he refuses to fight his top contender. But at the end of the day, if a fighter already sees, well, I mean, a fighter can switch it up very easily and just go, you know what? I'll just go to the fucking WBC route or the IBF. You know what I mean? They can go back to business as usual. And on top of that, the big problem here is for years and years and years, the managers, the promoters, the people in the television business, the executives, they've all profited from the existence of the alphabet organizations because, from a point of view of the TV executives, they want every fight to be a championship level fight. So if they just put on the marquee a championship fight, people are probably going to tune in. If they put it on the marquee outside the venue, the people walking by, they'll look at it and they go, I don't have anything to do. Maybe, just maybe, they can attract that person, buys a ticket because it's a world championship fight. Meanwhile, he doesn't know that there's 6 people walking around per division with a belt around their waist calling themselves the champion. So they profit from that. The managers, the promoters, they profit from that too because they can say, oh, I've promoted 20 champions in my career. Meanwhile, he's not telling you that, he used to manage the WBO interim intercontinental subdivision champion or something like that, right? So they all profit from that is the unfortunate reality. So until it actually starts hurting them, they're not going to go away from the sanctioning bodies. I mean, even now, you still see some of these people still clinging on to the old system. It's crazy, but that's the way it works for some of these people. And I don't know if it, like you said, I don't know if it's going to change because it does require a bit of heavy lifting. But then again, maybe TKO with their checkbook or whatever and their know-how, if they have any, maybe they can switch it up a little bit and improve things. But then again, this is boxing, and you know us, boxing fans, Chief, we tend to get cynical with time. Makes us cynical in our old age. So,
Yep.
we've been on here for 3 hours and 11 minutes. Went by fast.
Like the old days.
It went by fast, I'll say this. That's because there's not much going on. Now, somebody in the chat, excuse me if I forget, but somebody in the chat said that they wanted us to mention the Figueroa versus Nick Ball fight.
I read that, yes.
I don't know if you managed to catch it, but
Enough of the highlights to realize the fact it was an entertaining fight and a highlight reel knockout.
yeah, that was a very impressive knock. It came out of nowhere. That's what made it impressive. I mentioned it earlier in the beginning of the fight before Chief got here. I sort of recapped the fight a little bit, but it just goes to show you that anything can happen in boxing. And it's not like this fight was a mismatch on paper, but you figured that Nick Ball, with some of his recent wins, was a superior fighter. But again, hindsight always comes into play. And you look at how the fact that he struggled a little bit against TJ Toney. He also struggled against, what's his name? Sam. It's not Sam Altman, the Australian kid who always ends up getting cut for some reason. That's why he couldn't fight anyway. But he struggled against that guy. Now, those guys were movers, but nevertheless, you started seeing a couple of cracks in Nick Ball's armor. And he beat Raymond Ford, but that was also a very competitive fight. So it's not like he was invincible. So I don't think this should have been as surprising as it ended up being for some people. But the way it ended was certainly surprising. And Figueroa, whom some people thought might have been finished after losing in the rematch against Stephen Fulton, and then looking bad against Joed Gonzalez. A lot of people felt Joed Gonzalez should have gotten the nod in that one. Nevertheless, again, this is boxing. You can't take anybody lightly. And it's a shame for Nick Ball that he's in today's boxing landscape, because now this is probably going to be the first out of maybe 2 fights that he's going to have. So 50% of his year is probably going to be a loss. You know what I mean? So that's the shame of it. Whereas if this was the old days, and we're talking the 1940s or a little bit before that and after that, he would be back in the ring in about a month, maybe 2 months. And let's not even go back to the 1940s. Let's go back to the 1990s. Most of these top dudes could fight at least three times a year. But no, they're going to keep him in the shelf. We're probably not going to see him until September. Who knows who's going to fight. And we might never get a Figueroa rematch. I'm not saying it's the fight that demands a rematch necessarily, but I would like to see one, but we're probably not. So that's the way we'll live.
Probably you got a good fight with a nice result, and 2 guys are willing to do it again because nothing else is really on the horizon. Rollback is always a good thing. Rematches are not bad unless they're just not called for, and this is one that this doesn't fit that category. This could clearly be a rematch that people say, "Yep, I watch that again."
Right.
It's not one that people say, "Well, we've already seen it once, so we know what's going to happen." Necessarily, it was a very competitive fight. It might end sooner in Figueroa's favor. Figueroa might get caught by a shot he doesn't see coming from a shorter fighter reaching too far. These are things that can happen in a fight like that that whet the public's appetite of wanting to see something like that again. So I would definitely find a way to catch the rematch one way or the live or otherwise if they had one.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's the great thing about that though is even if the rematch doesn't happen, the featherweight division is so filled with talent that as long as they fight one of the top 10 guys, I don't think a lot of people will complain about that one. Who somebody says, yeah. So shout out to Barakua. He's the one that wanted us to talk about that. Shout out to Boxing Kangaroo, who's Sam Goodman. Yes, thank you. That was Sam. I knew it was Sam something, but I said Altman, by the way, Sam Altman, but it was Sam Goodman. Team Batman Boxing. Shout out to Team Batman Boxing. Always good to hear from him. He says, facts. Maybe they do Nick Ball versus Lopez for a return for Ball. I mean, Bernardo Lopez, I don't even think he should be fighting anymore. They said he got a brain bleed, and then I think the last time he fought was in exhibition or something, and he ended up getting dropped by some nobody. I mean, I don't know. People are saying he's not looking good. So I don't know if he should even be fighting anymore. But Fight Sports Talk says, I'm surprised Figueroa was bigger than Ball. Yeah, when you look at Ball, he's about 5 feet 3 inches tall or thereabouts. So everybody looks taller than him. But Figueroa, usually when you look at a tall guy compared to a shorter guy, the taller guy, you can see his shoulders, his legs. You can tell that he's thinner. Figueroa didn't really look thinner in those. I don't remember the legs, but I know the back. He had a very wide back. And I remember thinking, how did this guy used to fight at 122? It was insane.
Well, I also thought when I was watching the highlights that it was like two guys from two separate weight classes. I was like, this is a significant size differential here. But apparently Ball was still in that fight. So
now somebody did tell me that I think Figueroa was ahead on the cards, which I found surprising because I thought the judges would have liked Nick Ball's flashier shots, especially considering that they were in his home country. So every time he landed upstairs.
Somebody was ahead on 2 cards, and the other guy was ahead on 1. I don't remember which way that went because I did do some research on this. Nick Ball, Figueroa. Okay, so let's just hit Nick Ball and see what they had. Okay, drop the arrow box right there. We go. Figueroa was ahead on 2 cards, 106, 103, and Ball was ahead 107, 102 on a card. And that's what kind of sparked my attention to want to go back and see it, because when you have polar opposite scores on one card versus the other two, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then when you go to Box Rec, it says the fans had it average 105 to 104 for Figueroa. So I'm guessing it was just a close fight that Figueroa it didn't matter if it was close or not, because then was the fact that Ball got completely knocked out. I was at the store when it happened. I was talking to Gerson, and I think one of his buddies in his chat that it had just happened, and I was at the store at the time. So that's why I had to go back and look at the replay. So I was definitely surprised on how clean it was. It was just bam. Down goes Ball, gets back up, gets knocked through the ropes.
Well,
one thing about Figueroa, he's a finisher.
Shout out to the Boxing Kangaroo. He just sent me the official cards there. Yeah, and apparently, let's see, Marcus McDonald had Figueroa ahead, and Glenn Feldman had him ahead too. Yeah, you're right. So 2 cards for Figueroa, 1 card for Nick Ball, 107, 102. Now, this brings me to an interesting thing here, because so that would have been 117, 113 on that card. Okay, so he gave 9 rounds to Nick Ball. It's a bit of a weird card. 9 rounds. It was a competitive fight, but I'll say this, man. There's another controversy from England, which is that it was, excuse me, because I'm reading the chat at the same time. I can't do 2 things at the same time. But we had Murtazaliev, who was the latest boogeyman, or people were setting him up as the next boogeyman, took on Josh Kelly. And a lot of us thought that Josh Kelly was too fragile for Murtazaliev, and that despite his advantages in speed, Kelly would be overtaken by Murtazaliev. And he almost did. He ended up pulling off a upset win. But there was a little bit of controversy because one of the judges scored the last round 10-10. And if he would have scored it for Murtazaliev, which he very well easily could have, Murtazaliev would have retained the title on a draw. So now Murtazaliev and his team, they're appealing and they want an immediate rematch because of that card. And that's a weird thing, because it's not like the guy made a mistake in adding up the cards, the judge. He just simply decided to go with a 10-10, which he's allowed to do. But oftentimes judges are discouraged from scoring around 10-10. So, Chief, what do you think? Has there ever been any other? There must be cases where a judge has officially scored around 10-10, but isn't that supposed to be a little bit of an exceptional thing to do, to score around 10-10 officially?
Yes, it's definitely. Well, it's supposed to be a 10-point must.
Right.
So it's supposed to be a winner and a loser. So outside of 2 people getting knocked down or someone losing around a point deduction, there's usually supposed to be a winner of a round getting a maximum of 10 points. And then the loser getting 9 or less, depending on certain circumstances. That's the way it's supposed to go. But if 2 people really, really fought a very close, tough round. If you remember when they used to talk about the fights, and Larry, how did you score it? Not Larry, Harold Letterman, how'd you score it? Then Larry Merchant, what I say, I've got something to something else and one even. He always had an even round somewhere. So I guess, but he wasn't a professional judge.
Right.
Point being the fact you can do an even round, but I mean, it's supposed to be really rare circumstances, and sometimes when you see it, there's shenanigans involved. Do believe it was Holyfield Moore that cost Holyfield the fight because he knocked Moore down in the second round, and two judges had it as a 10-9 instead of a 10-8, and one of them had it at 10-10. If all of them would have given Holyfield a 10-8, the fight would have been at least a draw, if not a majority win for Holyfield. But the 10-10 is what blew people's minds because Holyfield scored a knockdown.
Right.
And it wasn't like a flash knockdown. He hit Moore with a solid hook and a right hand followed by a solid hook. And it almost sounded like the WWF when you hit in the middle of the ring, that they have that noise, to make it sound louder when they hit the ground. That's almost what it sounded like when Moore hit on all fours, and yet somebody scored it even. So it's happened in the past. I don't remember it happening often on a legit even round on a 10-10. I've seen 9-9s and other things, but I've rarely seen a 10-10 on a legitimately objective scored round. Not saying it doesn't happen. I just don't remember any.
Well, I mean, if let's say there's a round that's so bad where neither of the fighters does much, and they're just running around, would you make that round 10-10 or 9-9?
Well, there's no reason to give. If I'm making it even based off of the scenario you gave me, there's no reason to take a point away from anybody. So it'd have to be 10-10. Because remember, it's a 10-point must. So there has to be a maximum of 10 points given. The judges are not allowed to say, well, I'm going to take a point away from this guy and this guy. The referee has to tell you when to do that based off of disciplinary action and or if they're getting knocked down and there's a justification for them losing 10 points. So if neither one of them's doing everything supposed to be, thank you, the thud chief, talking about Michael Moore. If neither guy did anything and nobody deserved the win, then it would have to be 10-10. Because the judge doesn't have the right to take a point away themselves.
Right.
So nothing I've read or heard of or been told. And I mean, I didn't quiz his brain all night, but I did sit next to Harold Letterman at a fight and ask him how you scored fights before. So he never, it was a 12-round fight that we watched together. So there was a lot of talking done. If you can imagine me silent for 12 rounds.
Oh, come on.
Exactly. You can't because it won't happen. So he told me a lot of things. And one thing he never said was that the judge has the right to give less than 10 points for just because they want to. So,
well, that's
imagine
why
somehow or another that would come up.
That's why I've always been, because I mentioned Errol Graham versus Mike McCollum. Now, Graham scored a knockdown in the 5th round. The referee called it a knockdown, scored a knockdown. Yet none of the judges scored a 10-8. They scored a 10-9. And I don't remember Mike McCollum overwhelmingly doing anything in that round. So I don't understand how he goes from 10. None of them scored a 10-8. They all scored a 10-9.
I'm looking
That
at
is
one
one
of
of the
I don't really remember enough about that fight to remember that circumstance. I believe you, and I'm sure I'll see it, but I don't remember the fight enough to know.
Because usually, okay,
let's say be that way.
Let's say you get two fighters, right? One of them is winning the round, but then gets dropped. But he was winning in such an overwhelming way that then usually it's scored a 9-9 round. Am I correct, or am I missing something here?
Okay. It varies, but going back to the Holyfield Moore situation, the reason why two of them scored it a 10-9 instead of a 10-8 was because Holyfield deserved to win the round he got the knockdown. But more.
You're breaking up, Chief. You're breaking up. Yeah, if you could find yourself a nice place there.
All except for the last 2 seconds of the round when.
You're cutting up. You're cutting up. Cutting out, right? Chief, you're cutting out. I don't know if he... Sounds like he was walking around, and that's why he got... we lost the connection with the Chief Rooney there. In the meantime, yeah, listen, we're almost done here, but we're talking about the scoring of rounds. I mean, we're perplexed. I'm actually... Maybe it's because we've been on for 3 hours, but I don't really understand. So if a guy is dominating another fighter, fighter B, right? And then fighter B scores a knockdown, doesn't that make it a 9-9 round? Because, no, actually, that would be... man, I'm too confused here, and Chief already dropped out, so... Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this historical edition of the BD Boxing Show. We're going to try to do more, but again, it's just not a lot has been happening in the boxing world. Don't forget, however, we do have some boxing this Saturday via the TKO Zuffa, whatever you want to call it, organization. And, well, there's women's boxing too, apparently. But anyway, February the 15th, via Paramount Plus, you got Efe Ajagba taking on King Charles Martin. And so that should be an interesting little scrap right there in the heavyweight division. Also, the aforementioned, I believe it was the aforementioned, Risaushi Nishida ends up fighting that very morning. The next, or a couple of days after, February the 19th, you got the return of Jin Sasaki taking on an 8-rounder. It's an 8-rounder. I think he needs a little bit of a real tune-up after he got knocked out by Brian Norman. Okay, we got Chief back. Chief.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
It's all right. All right, so just to wrap it up here, you were talking about Moore versus Holyfield and why he was scored a 10-9. No, why he wasn't scored 10-9.
Yeah, well, it was scored 10-9 because according to what the judges were saying in the interviews afterwards, was Moore was winning all but the last 2 seconds of the round, so they scored it 10-9 even though there was a knockdown. Mm-hmm. Instead of a 9-9 or a 10-10. Well, one of them did score it at 10-10, but point being, the reason why Holyfield didn't get a 10-8 was because Moore was supposedly winning 2 minutes and 58 seconds of the round. So, again, the Mike McCallum and Harold Graham, I'm going to have to go back and rewatch that one because I don't remember enough of why they would have not given the 10-8 in that scenario. Because, like you said, I don't remember a situation where someone was knocked down in that fight and got up and fought like a man possessed to earn that point back.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to rewatch it.
It's possible to do that, and Harold Letterman and I think Emmanuel Stewart both talked about that at different points. That if someone gets up and fights hard enough, they can earn that point back in order to keep it from a 2-point deficit. Mm-hmm. But it's not an easy thing to do. You've usually got to really put yourself out there and really establish yourself to earn that point. But you're not going to win the round, but you can get earn the point back.
Right. So yeah, okay. So it can be done, but there's a whole bunch of red tape in front of all of that.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm looking at the Ring Magazine. Yeah, I'm looking at Ring Magazine. So they're all over the place here. I think they in the archives are actually misplaced. They actually misplaced an issue because they got the year-end review. Who is the fighter of the year? And in the 2005 version or page, they put the 2004 version of the Fighter of the Year issue. What the fuck? Let me just click on that, see if they made a mistake. Because I'm looking for the one that I told people. I'll actually maybe I'll post it on the Discord in case anyone's interested, or maybe in the comment section when I find it. But the issue of greatest trainers of all time, and also the greatest contemporary trainers at the time of all time. And yes, indeed, they put the year